that's where you've got cars speeding and flying through that intersection down there. So it's hard to say, oh, I'd love for them to sit up there, but that's selfish on my part.
And I've video. So basically, it renders the road to a one lane.
Isn't that typically illegal to park in a traffic lane?
So to summarize,
They don't care.
we'll
So
get
we need
no
to move
park
forward.
signs up. Do you want to do paint or discuss the paint?
I think we need to discuss and
We'll
see
know
what
market.
next steps there are
Okay.
as quick as we can while we.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be rude, but it's, I mean, as Kurt said, oh, I remember you from the SIT committee. Well, that was like over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is something that's been going on for 2 years, and it's not changing. It's just getting worse, just like it gets worse. And you've got to nip it in the bud, and I would do everything I can to help it.
We can no park within 2 weeks. Okay. Thank you for everyone's time. We'll adjourn and move to the work session.
Do you guys want to take a minute break, or you good to go?
Good to go.
Okay.
Do you guys want a minute break?
Yeah.
For the work session tonight, we had, I scheduled, because I have an open date, the discussion with regard to advisory commission committee organization, which takes off from the joint chair liaison meeting we had 2 weeks ago, I think it was now. And what I took from that meeting was, I put in, Kendra had started a chart a couple years ago, actually, and I just took that and added to it based on that discussion, and put together the chart that was included in your packet. And we'll use whatever comes out of this meeting, if we're able to come to consensus, to amend the resolutions for each of the committees and commissions, and then get their feedback on that with recommendations back to the board, and then bring those back to the board for hopefully the final adoption into the resolution. So I thought we could just go through the chart and some of the items that I was hoping to get the board's feedback on, and any comments from the public. And then there's 4 other questions I had that aren't in the chart, and then a 5th just kind of other discussion, if that sounds good for the board.
The chart, you mean, yeah. The table.
Yeah, the table, yeah.
Okay.
Each of the So in the table, each of the committees already has an established meeting time and date. I wasn't proposing any changes to that because it seems to work well for the committees. So that one was kind of left alone. The things that were added to this table, there's a column for what the current term of the members is, and then a couple columns over, there is a column that was added with proposed or suggested terms from what I heard from that meeting, and possible term limits. So that's maybe where we'll start because we have the current term of each of the committees listed. And what I heard from that meeting of the joint chairs was 2 3-year terms with, once they've served those 6 years, they would take a year off unless there wasn't any suitable applicants to fill that vacancy, and then the board could consider reappointing somebody that's term limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, either 3 or 4. I mean, 3 seems funny number to me, but 4 seems
Yeah.
nice too. So.
I think the 6 years is how we got there that night. It was after you left, but
The state term limits
Oh,
are
yeah.
3 2-year terms.
Oh,
That's probably where it
yeah.
came from. They're either 2 4-year terms or 3 2-year
So
terms.
the key is the staggering.
Staggering, yeah.
So that, which somehow we have to figure out the people that are on right now with their term, one of them are
Right.
in April of 12, if I remember those dates correctly. Like all of the planning commission maybe is like that, or somebody's like that.
Yeah.
So
so we would have to
figure out
work.
the initial stagger of all this.
Um,
And I
it-
think, and related to that same topic, of terms, if we're going to go this way and stagger them, I think that anybody who's appointed in the interim when someone resigns
not
gets to
fair.
fill out that term only, and then they get reappointed for another term when they don't. I think otherwise we've got the staggering all screwed up,
Right.
and it makes a mess.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. I said, if someone resigns early and we have to appoint someone in the interim, they only fill out the term that
Oh,
other
the
person
remaining
had,
term,
otherwise
yeah.
our staggering gets screwed up. They can get reappointed or whatever, but
And it's staggered. And then Trustee Sorelli sent his comments around. I think everybody got those, but I also printed out a copy for the board.
Hey, Matt, one thing I think we should make an exception on is the Historical Commission, that all the other advisory committees should be required, you should be required to live in the town of Superior, except, make the exception for the Historical Commission. Yeah. We would lose our history.
And
But don't necessarily reside here. So they're very keen on preserving history that they don't necessarily.
so maybe it's something like appointees need to be residents at least 1 year or with a vested interest in town, such as a property owner in Superior, a business owner in Superior, or born in Superior? I mean, would that cover everybody that is in Historical Commission?
I think, but I don't think we would want
Just a
people
reminder, turn
on
on your microphones.
all the other,
Okay.
up there.
TV audience.
Because, there are business owners here that have a vested interest and would like to serve on these committees, as well as property owners that don't actually live here. But, I mean, that's something to consider, as well as if you were, born in Superior, which is the Historical Commission. So if you're making exceptions, maybe we should have something concrete that we're looking at.
That seems way too broad for most of the committees for me, way too broad.
I'm just wondering, if we just keep the same, you have to be a resident in town, I mean, the Historic Commission, those people are not going to leave, I hope, if you can't vote. I mean, we're just talking about voting members of the committee, so anybody can show up and be part of a committee, so, as opposed to trying to somehow
Define
come
it?
around, to make an exception for a particular committee.
Might
I don't
lose their
think-
vo-
I
we
don't
might
think
lose
these
their
people are-
volunteerism, though, but-
Yeah. I actually would disagree, Mayor. I think they actually take a lot of pride in casting those votes on the Historical Commission. I don't see any difficulty at all saying residents for every advisory committee except for the Historical Commission, which if they're not resident, they would have lived here or been raised here or have that connection to the community.
Some demonstrated something, yes.
Yeah.
Do we not have enough members, I mean, citizens of Superior that
Are interested?
would, yeah, exactly.
We don't know that answer.
I can't recall, when we get applications turned in, how many of the, or what percent of the applications say they're interested in the Historical Commission?
Have we had any openings lately?
No, not in a while, and I can tell you, I can't tell you how many residents that currently sit on that committee. I'd have to go back.
I think it's just a couple. How many is it, Gladys?
Phyllis, do you know?
Gladys knows.
All I can remember is Wally Wolagorsky and his
Yeah,
wife Karen,
that's-
Larry Dorsey,
Yeah.
and then it's Bob Morgan and Denzel Ackland and Mary and somebody Cartwright. And I don't remember the rest. I can look it up while we're waiting right here. If you
Right.
It might be
Okay,
helpful.
all right. I'll look.
So, given she's looking at that, if we're talking about first the table, I think there were a couple of things omitted from the table that need to be in there. So the first is quorum, and quorum, I think, needs to say the majority of the appointed members, not maybe the full roster in case there are vacancies, and that if it's odd, it's the majority, if it's even, it's 1/2 the members plus one. So I think we need to have quorum defined in the table. I think we also miss something about elections in here. And what we miss, let's see, for the election of the chair, I think it should say that the discussion of the candidates' interest in the chair position should be raised in the January meeting so that all people will be, sort of eased into the position, not that it just gets sprung on the February meeting, because other than the chair, they might not recall that February is the meeting and all that. So I think it should be something where it's discussed in January and voted in February. And that doesn't mean that people can't nominate themselves in February as well. It should be, they can nominate themselves either time, but I think it needs to come up in the January and the February meeting. And the other thing I think we should have in here is clearly not just laying out how the chair and vice chair are elected, but also what their jobs are. With the chair, to me, the chair is the person who runs the meeting, and is an important part of that, works to get input at the meeting and from all the committee members, and both input at the meetings and whatever other committee tasks they assign. They should really strongly encourage participation by all the members, and that working with the staff and the committee, they set the agenda. I don't think it should be more of a position than that. For the vice chair, it's merely standing in for the chair when the chair is not there. And I think it's also really important that we make it clear that the vice chair doesn't automatically become the chair, and that it shouldn't be that expectation so that people feel like they're almost voting out the vice chair. That's too much. It should be, and sometimes there's that presumption that they're going to become the chair next year, and I think we should make it clear that that's not the presumption.
I would
In other
like.
words, there's an election
It's a
every
one-year
year.
position for each position. You can go back and forth or not, or whatever, but it's not a graduation.
I don't, I'd like to open it up. I don't necessarily see the need for a permanent vice chair on each of these committees, but instead simply an appointed one on an as-needed basis when the chairman knows he or she is going to be gone. It's there to run that meeting. What I'm a little concerned about is exactly what you talked about with the permanent vice chair. There may be some presumption that they just will become the chair next term, and/or if the chair and the vice chair don't necessarily see eye to eye, et cetera, I don't want to build in conflict on any committee between chair and vice chair. So I think we've had chairs that function quite well in directing. These are small committees. I don't know that we need a two-person structure at the top on a permanent basis.
And I think, I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's really important that if there is that disagreement, that disagreement probably reflects disagreement on the committee, and it's important not to just have the one voice, so.
Well, no, you have 9 voices. You've just
The
defined the
one voice
chairman,
organization.
you've just defined the chairman as pretty much the organizational, and then the administrative, et cetera, not necessarily the the voice of the committee. That voice is 9 voices. So, I'm just concerned about introducing more than needed by creating this structure of this 2-person structure at the top, because I think it's sort of against human nature to presume if you're the vice chair of are we calling the vice chair of a committee, that you would not immediately elevate to the top. So I'm just a little bit concerned. The committees I've sat in, they've functioned quite well without that perpetual vice chair. But instead, an appointed vice chair should the chairman be missing from the meeting.
I think the responsibilities, if the chair is going to be gone, should be clear, and that we know who are we talking about with the agenda, who's taking over the meeting, who's hearing about absences or not at the next meeting. So I think it should be a clear, if the chair is not there, here's the vice chair, here's who it gets appointed.
Yeah, and I'm
Here's who functions in
curious
that
to hear
position.
from the rest of people.
Well, let's, okay. If we want to try to get through the board stuff, then we need to,
But it is a work session, and we've got 2 people that are been
Right,
waiting
so-
to speak.
right, it's a work session, which is a work session for the board. So
Not public hearing.
if you want to try to get through this, we should-
Yeah, I think there are a lot more
Because I
points
suspect there's
we've
a
got to
lot of-
work through if our,
So the 3 of the 7 historical commission members live in town.
Only 3 out of 7? So if we made that a requirement, that would pretty much decimate the historical. And you would agree there'd be enough people that would step up? No?
you'd also lose and demotivate a very, very productive group of people, which I don't see as doing anything positive for the town. So
Whatever works. I mean,
yeah.
at least from my impression is that all these people are really interested in the history of the town, and they'd come there if they were voting on something or not. But
Right.
I don't have strong feelings, honestly, about it.
Could we talk to Larry Dorsey and see how he feels on that?
Well, we're going to send this to the.
Right.
and we're gonna give the
There's
board
something.
their recommendations
Correct.
for their committee.
Okay.
So-
If I could move to,
Residency, I just want to wrap up that one.
Everything about the historical commission. And they have to have some sort of connection to the town. I'm not sure how you define that.
Okay.
We will let you work on that.
You have to pass a history test.
Well, I was trying to define that earlier, what that would be. As maybe it's property owner, or they
Right.
were born here, or they lived here 15 or 20 years, or they're a business owner here.
Yeah, we'll see what we can come up with.
Yep, sounds good. Anything else along the vertical axis of those things?
code of conduct.
Yeah, well, I'm working, so the name, we have the purpose, we have the meeting dates, we have the terms, the chair, the vice chair. I guess we need to wrap up the vice chair conversation.
Right.
I mean, the one,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
On the chair, I heard 1 year, and then we can include language. for,
Duties.
Duties.
Duties, but then also nominations in January, elections in February.
Nominations in January and February.
Well, right, you can nominate yourself. Anybody can nominate in February, but I think the point was you need a little heads up
Right.
before
It
the
needs to be
election.
initiated in January
Right.
and finalized in February.
Yeah.
are you still in members? Is that where you're at right now?
No, I was at chair, and then we were moving to vice chair.
Okay.
So we wrapped that up.
Okay.
So I agree that it probably would make sense to have someone identified if the chairperson isn't there, that they can run the meeting, but somehow it needs to be made clear that next year you don't become the chair. So, I don't know, some language regarding that.
I agree. It just makes it more seamless, if the chair is gone or sick or whatever, to have somebody identified ahead of time.
As opposed to
People know who
staff
that is.
trying to scramble to figure out who to call.
One of the other things that seems to go along in there with duties and all the rest of that comes up the issue of that agenda setting thing. And I didn't see a column in here about that, and it wasn't one of your questions, so I don't know if it's, since it's sort of like duty of the chair, maybe it's an appropriate time to bring that up. It's, my suggestion is that any member of the committee should be able to, similar to what we supposedly allow for the board here, where any member of the committee should be able to raise a new agenda item if two people ask for it to put it on prior to the agenda's posting time, and should either be added to that agenda, or put on as sort of down by the new business part that was requested in that agenda. It's a reminder or a mention item, and that it should be put on a date certain agenda, no later than the next meeting out or maybe the second meeting out. I don't care, but I think we should make it really clear what the agenda setting process is.
So it has to be done in advance of the meeting, not during the meeting.
It has to be done during the time in which the agenda, just before the agenda's posting time.
Right, because we'd want to have a formal agenda before the meeting, so in case we start doing this, publishing the agendas of committees, they need to be done in advance as opposed to just
Well, and
showing
in
up.
fact, they're subject to sunshine laws,
Mhm.
and we need to make sure that
They're
you're following
posted,
that.
Yes. So I thought that was appropriate with the posting requirements and all that, and that doesn't mean that bringing it up in the meeting can't make it come up on the next meeting agenda, but you wouldn't be able to bring it up for this meeting agenda. It's not like you have to wait for the meeting to be over to suggest something to be on the next agenda, so.
So I have a suggestion on the vice chair. So there's an election for the chair that is held every year, and maybe the chair appoints a vice chair every year.
I totally would have a hard time with that. It should be the committee's thought. It should be the committee's.
Or, well, however you appoint it, but it's not necessary an election, because that gives you the impression that you are going to be graduating and moving up.
Why? It's just a position called vice chair. It's not a position called vice chair to become chair.
Well, I mean, or we
Lots
can
of
have just
committee.
language in here that states
vice
that,
president
but one
doesn't-
way or another.
Yeah, I agree. The vice president doesn't become president
Next year,
automatically.
in 4
Yeah.
years? No way. Yeah.
And I think
Nor does the mayor pro tem become mayor.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
All right, so
You can just
think
put
it's-
language in there saying the vice chair doesn't become chair automatically. There's a new election.
That's it.
there's
Yeah.
a new election. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
The other part of the agenda setting and all that, I thought might be something like periodically the committee should review the relationship of the agendas to the stated work plan.
To the what?
Stated
To
work
their
plan.
Their yearly work plan. That seems reasonable.
Yeah, but I think it's unnecessary to state that. I think this is a
Yeah.
guiding document, and if we get too specific, I mean, that hopefully is part and parcel of everything the committee does as it
I agree.
works
It's
towards
just
the work
related to the
plan.
agenda setting and trying to make sure that, the committee doesn't
Yeah.
just start.
I'd
adding
rather
things
just
that
have
put it
agenda
on base.
setting be the protocol of how the agenda's formed.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
agree with
It's
that.
fine.
To me, it looks like we're trying to micromanage them.
Yeah.
It might appear that way.
Hardest
Are
my
we-
tables. So, let's see, so then we were at the term limits. I think did we solve that one?
yeah.
Okay.
And that would apply with the reappointment this year?
I don't know.
To figure out
Can
the
I-
one thing.
yeah, can I-
Tough to.
Yeah, can I let
have to do the
you
math
work
on
on
that.
that for a while, because I think it might be a little hard to figure out how to stagger.
Okay. So you'll get back with us on that? Okay.
I have to do a chart.
Yeah, okay.
Next one is ethics. Did we
Oh,
have-
wait. There's
whoa,
there's one thing
back
about
up.
the members that I, wait a minute.
I'm not ready to move on here.
Oh, okay,
So-
I'm sorry, I thought we had,
No,
sorry,
no,
we
I
had
have
talked about it.
one thing. So trustee Sorelli, and I have his permission, although he put it in writing too, but I met with him on Saturday, right? So I strongly agree with him that no board member should serve in any committee.
And
But-
that was one of my follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
well,
only-
I was still
but
on my
only this-
column, but,
Huh?
sure, yeah. Yeah.
But only as a liaison, but not as a voting, or not as a member of any committee, because there's the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I have a comment to make about that. So first, that it's completely legal for a board member to serve on an advisory committee through many duly elected boards that, have no adverse agendas or any of the rest of that. And I haven't heard of any problem that's arisen from it, and I think board members can choose to volunteer or serve on committees as per their time and interest, and having to resign from a committee might hinder some from running for the board because they'd have to give up this interest that they've got. Another is that committees are supposed to be an avenue for giving community a forum for discussing in greater length, and board members should be able to participate in that discussion as citizens and vote as citizens, like we have the right to vote in November elections. We don't say, just because you vote here on whether or not something shows up on a ballot election or whatever, we can't then vote in the ballot election. That's just not correct. That's not proper, I don't think. I really think trustees are members of the community and eligible for committee membership, as has been the case for, a decade or more? I don't know. And they were often elected for their interest and involvement in various committees. And that's something that the people who
If
elected
I may,
them-
Lisa.
Can I finish?
Yeah.
I'd just really like to finish. Thanks. And they were elected for their interest and involvement in various committees, and I think they would certainly recuse themselves from making the board appointments for that committee. They're seeking to be appointed to, of course. And I think if the group votes to disallow board members, who are citizens, from serving on committees, then there would be resignations of board members from all relevant committees, whether or not they are named as advisory committees or not, and that's a distinction without a difference. It's not a material difference. And that would mean a resignation from the RCAC, but also a resignation from the Louisville Library Committee, because the only way we were able to have a board member appointed to that committee was that I argued that the town allowed our board members to serve on committees. Theirs don't. They objected strongly, and the only caveat was that we did allow board members to serve on committees. It had to go to their city council before they were willing to go for that. So it was quite a brouhaha, and we would not be able to argue that point anymore. And I think we'd also have to have resignations from the Economic Development Committee as well, because it's just a name game. It's not a material difference in the kind of committee that it is. If we're going to make a principle, then we need to make the principle fully.
I'm fully on board of making it across the board. I think no board member should serve in any committee whatsoever. And so does Trustee Sorelli, and I think Trustee Pennington, Trustee Hanson, Trustee Williams. We've got at least 5 members on this board that feel very strongly about that.
That means, though, that all the committees that we're talking about also are affected.
So be it.
Which committees again are you referring to?
Economic Development, Library Committee, RCAC, and any others. The
Economic
only reason we were allowed,
Development is an advisory committee. so
it's a name game only. That's the
No.
only
No,
difference.
it's not, and that's not true.
It is
Lisa.
completely.
It was specifically not created as an advisory committee at this point, because it was premature to do so.
But it serves no different capacity. It still advises the board on, whether you call it an advisory committee or not. It considers budgets, it considers programs that come to the board. It advises the board on those sorts of things.
I don't think we've ever taken a vote on the
difference at all.
on the economic
We want
development.
transparency.
Yeah.
That's completely an inappropriate distinction.
And
No,
so
it's not.
explain how the Library Board of Trustees is different.
Because the library
Or
board of
not
trustees in Louisville, you're not allowed. They did not want to allow anyone who is a board member to serve on that committee in their town. They don't allow it on any of their committees, and they didn't want to allow Superior to allow any of its board members on either, because they thought that was not their deal. So if we
So how would we appoint somebody to that?
we would have to just appoint some citizen as
Citizen.
they do.
And are you?
Fine with that.
I'm fine with that, absolutely.
The economic development is no different.
Not committees of the board.
Right.
Those are the board committees.
The Economic Development Committee is no different in function.
That's not a committee, though, that is set up by the board.
It,
It has no relevance.
I think explaining that nuance to the citizens is going to be pretty hard to make. And I think wrong.
I think at the time, when the board actually does a resolution and makes it an advisory committee, then I'd say, yeah, it makes sense that we not have board members as voting members,
Right.
but they would be liaisons.
It is an advisory committee in every function of the word.
So the
Then-
question is, how do we resolve this, since there's a majority on this board that feels very strongly one way?
Then with that, with that argument, then the Transportation and Safety Committee shouldn't have members on the board
saying
as well.
Committee
That's
of the
different.
board.
There
That's
are
a committee of the
advisory
board, as
committees
opposed to
and there's
advisory
committees of
to
the board.
Okay, so are they legally different?
No. I mean, this is my whole issue.
I'd
with
have to
advisory
think about this. So
committees.
if you
Yeah.
think about the federal government or the state government, they have subcommittees. So we would call this a committee.
My issue in all of this is that none of this is codified, and that has always been my issue, and that's why we started even drafting this chart, is because I think it should be codified. What's an advisory committee? What's a committee of the board? Who can serve? The terms. All of these things I think should be codified somewhere. Most importantly,
Draft OA.
Okay, and I did in 2006,
Right.
and it was summarily rejected by the board. So I completely
Different board.
understand.
This is a different
I
board.
know. I'm just throwing that out there. So I actually have one drafted already. But my concern really is also the authority of each of these committees. That's what concerns me. We call them advisory committees, but some of them appear to have some more authority than just advising. And If that's not true, then
Well,
I'll.
then we can clarify that.
And
Yeah,
we can
well,
clarify that as well.
Can you clarify it now? What do you mean? What authority are you referring to?
Well, I guess I just need, at some point, and I don't want to change the discussion because you all are, I think, on a different topic. But when we get there, I think another topic needs to be what kind of authority, if any, do you want each of these committees to have?
Right.
So,
Well-
she's saying, they just advise the board. They can't implement new programs, they can't spend money.
For example,
Well-
doesn't RCAG have a budget? So,
But that's approved by the board.
But if it-
budget.
Yeah, I mean,
where,
they have a budget for their program.
They have no spending authority.
Right.
Nobody has any spending authority besides the
Once
manager and the
budget's
board.
adopted, then the manager-
if I can articulate the conflict I see, I think there is a conflict when a member of an advisory, a trustee is a voting member of an advisory committee, because they can both vote there on a particular program and vote where they're supposed to have an objective capacity at the board level. They're not objective. They're subjective. They've already voted pro or con that issue. The reason the Library Board of Trustees is different is because the superior board member who serves on that committee can only cast one vote. They cast the vote within committee, but cannot cast that vote at the board level because they're not on the Louisville City Council, where the vote, second vote is cast, the vote of ultimate approval is cast. So to lump them all into the same category, I think, is a little bit convenient, but not necessarily accurate. Having said that, if in fact somebody wants to be pure simply about saying no trustee can, I'm happy to give up that position to a resident member appointed to that board.
I think that might be reasonable, but we should try to, I think there was some discussion that they would allow more superior residents to be on the library board at one time, and I'm not sure if that went anywhere.
It was sort of a little too early to bring that up for discussion.
Okay.
It certainly can be brought up for discussion there, but I mean, I think that's a material difference. Only one vote can be cast, and it's in committee. It's not at the board level for the Louisville Library Board. So
It's easily solved by having the person not vote for the budget on the committee.
No, seriously, I'm
If
not going to
that's really your
compromise this.
issue.
No, my issue is deeper
If
than
it's
that.
not everyone but me sort of thing, yeah.
Well,
It depends if you want to have this discussion now or later.
I was assuming that we were having just walking down the issues.
I'm hoping to avoid this discussion, so I'm saying that the majority of the board feels this way very strongly, so however it's codified, I hope it happens
I'd actually
sooner
like
rather
to
than
have
later.
a resolution drafted to that effect and have a board vote on this issue.
Do you want to do this all, I was hoping we were going to do this all as one big topic, but maybe we're
Well, if
gonna
it can
do
be
this
accomplished as
individually.
such, but if not, then let's separate them.
I would second that.
I'm in the minority on board members, but I think it's really important that we be careful about that if it's board members on advisory in any way, it's board members on advisory in any way.
So I think Kendra
That's
was
fine.
working on trying to identify what's an advisory committee and what are committees of the boards, and then when we decide what's
And
an
what all
advisory
kinds of
committee,
things are
those
considered.
advisory committee members and board members can't be voting members of them. Okay. Anything else along those lines? Let's see. I was working along the top, so I,
Actually-
yep.
So one of the things I was wondering when we were talking about the the staggering of the elections or the appointing, as well as the elections of the chairs. So would these new provisions go into effect immediately, or would they go into effect the next consecutive term? How would
The only
we?
thing that might not go into effect immediately is the staggering of the terms. We just have to figure out how that's going to work.
And also, the way that I originally drafted the ordinance was so that the ordinance would require that each committee have a resolution. And each committee gets its own resolution. The resolution establishes the number of members, the terms, all of that. So the way that I saw it happening is that each of those would come back to you for each committee. So,
Okay, so I think I was on members and term limits.
Mhm.
Are we done with?
Right. Yeah.
Multiple, is that also multiple members?
I thought I.
Oh,
no, yeah. Right.
Well, no, this would be, yeah, so this is.
So on the multiple members,
Sorry.
So, do you want to talk about it? Or?
Well, no, I just mentioned, how are we going to implement that after we've passed the resolution? Are we implementing it right away? Is it, something that's grandfathered in that
That would
they've
be addressed in
already?
each of the resolutions. So I think what Matt and I would do is go through and make the chart about who's affected, particularly by the stagger and the term limits, and then we would put all that in the resolution that you adopt. And what we would do is, if necessary, grandfather certain members in, depending on when they started and how the
Right.
terms were.
And I mentioned we're going to get input from each of the committees as well before it comes back to the board, so we'll have that information.
So let's see, go ahead.
No, I was just moving on. I want to make sure and get this whole discussion in by 7. On residents, same resident on multiple committees, I would like to avoid that if at all possible. My personal goal is to create enough interest among this large community that, 12,000 residents, all I think, have the potential to be very engaged if invited to be a part of the team. I'd like to see us limit representation to one committee, and if this poses a problem in the future, deal with it in the future to broaden that to more committees. But I'd like to start at one person, one committee.
I tend to
And
agree
I
with
agree
that.
with that.
I agree.
I agree with that.
the one thing that raises, though, is the issue of the ProStack OSAC. And so bringing that up,
That's the next.
if I can bring that up, I'd like to do that. And one thing is that I think we should change the
So
name.
just so we're clear,
So we can't.
is everybody sort of
Yes.
general consensus about
Yes.
that concept?
Yes.
I think we should encourage people to be in what they want, and if they
Mhm.
want to serve in more than one, but I'm not willing to go to the mat on it.
Yeah.
I think ProStack should be renamed. It's this whole issue of this as a chair, one serve on the other, and all that sort of junk. And if we're not going to have more than one person on more than one committee, then I don't think that crossover works at all. And besides, I think we should have ProStack be renamed Parks, Recreation, and Trails, or Parks and Recreation Committee, and open space should be removed from that. The board should, we should do any trade-offs that need to be done between parks and open space at our level, not within the subcommittee. And we should, that's our job to make those trade-offs, if it's, open space versus whatever. The chairs shouldn't be formally appointed to any position or responsibility on the opposite committee, and should not even be members, as we just said. If that's the way you want to go, if one person, one member, then they shouldn't be on the other committee. And I would like to see, for park, when we're talking also about, who's members and member terms and all that sort of stuff, I'd also like to see a balance across the park, or whatever we're going to call it, committee, to say at least one person, in a position that represents parks, one person that represents rec, so that at least those positions get raised. Otherwise, you might end up with a whole committee of parks fans or a whole committee of rec fans. Just one, and then everybody else is at large, I don't care. And they're meant to make that position. They can vote any way they want, but they have to articulate the argument, I think, or have some duty of care of that respect. So that's where I would feel.
Do we have a rough idea of how many citizens serve on multiple committees? How many people will this affect?
It's a handful.
Champagne.
It's less than 5, less.
John Nybarger,
And Jim?
Jim.
Vice, a little bit different, that's another
It's
issue.
the chair, they're serving as a chair.
Yeah,
to-
yeah.
And the other option to Lisa's idea here is that we leave OSAC and ProStack the way they are, and have the chairs serve as a non-voting liaison to the other.
Right.
I think there was a lot of comment when we had the meeting that open space overlap was a big issue, a big problem, and I really think they should be two clean committees with clean responsibilities. One being parks and sort of develop stuff, one being open space, and we get recommendations from each according to what they think are the priorities.
So the history of ProStack was, we were supposed to appoint people that were interested in parks, and then people that were interested in recreation. Then there was a trails an appointment and an open space advocate. I think that really over the course of time that this committee has really evolved into doing recreation and parks, and probably I don't think that we need having that same sort of direct appointment to a specific
Right.
issue makes sense anymore, at least from my perspective.
I don't think it functions that way in reality.
I don't think so either.
No open space,
Jim,
no crossover.
what's your,
You have to be at the mic then.
Well, we need to give Lisa this. and Dana
I
if
agree,
they want
and
to.
we're going to run out of
And
time.
Gladys.
Just as a-
Because,
Briefly,
They were-
Jim Payne, Superior from ProStack. Trustee Skumatz has introduced a subject that has not been discussed in any of our conversations, and I think it's a good one. I've had some constructive conversations with Chairman D'Souza of the OSAC committee, and I think we had some good ideas, but I think this is not the venue for that quite yet.
premature?
It was raised at the dinner, and I thought
It would be-
discussed quite a lot.
Will be a
Well,
good.
but it wasn't,
Yeah.
It'll be a good, hopefully that we'll be able to incorporate all this when these resolutions come back. So, I mean, we're not voting on anything tonight, so I think there'll be plenty of time to.
okay, but then I'll just say this, that what I was pursuing with Dana, and I think there's some good thoughts here between us, is to look at some kind of separation, but it's not, you have to, there's a lot of open space that's not part of natural open space, it's not part of OSAC's concern.
Oh, okay.
So,
Call it something other than
Right,
open
so
space.
developed
natural
open
open
space or
space and
whatever.
parks,
Don't
recs,
call
and
it open
trails, but
space.
something like that would be a good avenue.
Sure. Sounds good. So I'll take a break since who would like to make a few, we'll have citizen comment for a half moment, and then we'll try to get back through this.
On this 4G404 South Third Avenue, I have 3 comments, and I'll make them very brief.
Thank you.
One, it is a sad, sad thing that you will not allow residents that have put massive amount of time into the Historic Commission, that was born and raised here, that you're going to cut them out.
we're not.
This would be, yeah.
We voted
I think
that down.
Exception, Gladys.
Gladys, we're actually
That's the
enlarging
exception.
the Historical
I
Commission
know,
to 2 more
but
members.
that's
But if
been
you saw one, a
discussed,
different-
And I'm telling you, you've got a lot more people outside of this town dedicated to that Historic Commission than you do in.
And they're not threatened.
And it would have not got to where it is today if it wasn't for those people outside of town. Open space.
So
cannot-
Gladys, to be clear, are you supporting having out-of-towners on Historical Commission or not?
Yeah.
You want them, okay.
We are
Okay,
too.
so are we.
The Open Space Board can deal only with open space areas that deal with the tax district. That is all OSAC can deal with. So open space needs to stay on ProStack as the way it is presently, because there's lots of open space area that is not under the tax district. And so you've got to look at that tax district, because that's the reason OSAC was created in the first place. My other comment is that 2 3-year terms is way too long.
Okay.
Lisa Nybarger. I live at 1514 East Waldona Way. I'm chair of RCAC. I just have 2 quick comments. One is, if we, for election of chair, it says a simple majority of the entire committee, and I think that might be an issue with some committees, so maybe we should put some kind of time frame in there, like if it doesn't happen in February, that it has to happen in March, and it's the majority of the quorum. Majority of the quorum, or the
Majority of the
present.
People
If we
present.
have
Pushed till
quorum
March.
at the next meeting, and then it's the majority of that, just so that it's clear that if you don't get all the members present, it could take 6 months. It could take, so that there's a time limit so that it actually happens. And then I don't really know how I stand on term limits. I'm torn because I think that we potentially could have a problem on some of the committees, one in particular, the one I'm on, because we don't have a strong, we're not controversial, we're pretty simple, we have all our plans in place. Over
think
the
that would be
years,
the-
we've done that, but I think that if we don't have, I think it was stated earlier that if people don't apply, then other people, the same people would get reappointed. And so maybe if that isn't in there, hopefully that will be in there, but if it isn't in there, that we can reevaluate that in a couple of years to make sure that, I'm all for getting lots of people involved. I would love that. I just don't want us to bite the head off.
There's been outreach up the email.
Yeah.
And then I do think the one other thing about the vice chair, I think it's important to have one, just so that, like, when we do go into a meeting and the chair isn't there, we know who to look for leadership for that meeting. And I think that helps alleviate just potential chaos, or chaos isn't the right word, but so
Yep.
it doesn't function as efficiently. So thank you.
Thanks. So let's see, I think.
And can I just make one comment? So I would be in favor of having, if there's, after you put a vote out to the residents, and there is no residents that want to come forward to a committee and apply, in whatever the process is that we have set, then I'm in favor of appointing or reappointing members that would be going past the 2-3-year terms, but only if that process is followed first.
Yep, sounds good.
Excuse me, could I just, one thing that I think was discussed, got left out, and that's the length of the meetings. Quite a number of members of the different committees keep bringing this up. So I think that's something we should
They run too long,
address.
is that what the?
It's not so much, it's whether they should stop at 2 hours, whether they could go over, and what exactly people are signing up for.
Okay. Let's see, so, sorry, walking through the top. Vice Chair, member term, ethics, I think, was next on the list.
Ethics, I've prepared an ordinance that we'll bring back to you that simply says that advisory committee members are subject to the ethics code in the code.
And do you think do you think it's important for them to sign something that they recognize that, or you just want to tell them that that's
It's up to you. You can certainly have them sign something. If once we put it in the code, it will apply to everyone.
I'm a firm believer in signing. It makes sure increases the probability that you've actually read
right.
what it is. And two, I also would suggest that on the application form, particularly on those that, involve, on the application form, that it references the ethics issue and that it says if you're involved, for example, in open space or ProStack, in any way that we should know about, or however we want to put it, in that industry, or your spouse is involved in that industry, that be disclosed. I would like knowing, as I'm vetting a candidate, whether or not we're getting into some potential conflicts.
So that,
I thought there was a question on there about conflicts.
Okay,
check. I
just
think there's already
if you'd review that.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I
Go
think we
ahead.
should also give them the sunshine laws and stuff like that.
Yeah, seems reasonable. Attendance, do we?
This one was lacking stuff. I thought it didn't tell you, and so what happens? Someone could get a talking to, and then they could just not come for the next 3 years, and you're still screwed because they haven't decided to resign. There's nothing here that says somebody has the power to resign them, if or whatever it takes. And so I thought something like.
This language was taken from what the planning commission adopted.
Just saying, it still doesn't give us.
Yeah, the ordinance I drafted says 3 consecutive unexcused absences from 3 consecutive regular meetings.
Well,
And
if I, so
That's good.
what I thought we might want to talk about, where is it? Terms, I think. Quorum and terms.
Kendra, I think that's
Okay.
fair. I mean, that's
And this is unexcused.
unexcused, right.
So if
Right.
someone gets ill and can't make 3 consecutive meetings, that's not an automatic
Right.
removal. Or,
Right.
Right.
But what if I was thinking if they if they get their little talking to, but then they miss another meeting, maybe the committee should vote on whether they are retained on the committee or not. And then or the board can opt to remove them at any time after 3 absences out of 8 or something like that.
Yeah.
Something so that there's an external vote if they just let it slide and it's causing problems.
I would actually agree with there being some definitive process there. I don't think we can get to it tonight, but I'd entertain.
However,
Yeah, right.
I was looking at Louisville's removement from the committees, and I think they have pretty all-encompassing violations of ethics laws, conviction of felony. There's a whole list if you look in where Louisville.
Yeah, I just
what-
have a general misconduct at meetings, which includes any act that may interrupt the orderly process of the meeting.
Well, I kind of like how Louisville has spelled it out. It's very clear and understanding for anyone off the street to understand what that really means.
And I have another comment, and that's one of the things I've seen on some boards, and not necessarily these committees, but sometimes they need a special meeting or something like that, and then the special meetings become, we're going to schedule the next special meeting out of the people who can come to that special meeting, so then it turns out that the people who could come to the normal meetings can't come to these special meetings, and how does that affect their attendance and excuses and all that? So you might take that into consideration as well. It becomes this revolving thing of, oh, but George can never make a second Friday, but that wasn't the day George was supposed to be able to make it. So anyway, that sort of thing I think needs to be taken into account. The other thing about attendance, I think, is you shouldn't just be able to contact the chair, but I think the chair or the staffer.
To report the absence?
For your absence, yeah. That's an easy thing.
Robert's rules?
My perspective on this is, if we really need to do that, great. I mean, I don't want, so it's important to be able to run meetings so that you have some reasonable expectation about how a meeting was going to run, but 2, I don't want it to stymie conversation because you're like, oh, let's see, what's the point of order there? So some reasonable accommodation so I'm not sure what that would actually mean at the advisory.
I think
who's going to enforce it?
If it devolves, it goes to Roberts or something
Right.
like that.
I have a very simple alternative to
Oh.
Roberts.
And
Right.
Trustee Sorrell, I think, was leaning the way yours.
Right.
Yeah, I don't like Roberts. I have a very, I've done this for other clients of mine who don't like to get involved in Roberts.
Yeah, I think Roberts
Okay.
scares
Bring that.
Too deep.
Roberts is the
People.
recognized.
But nobody, we don't even know Robert's rules.
I don't
of
know.
order.
That's why I did a simpler one.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'm not
I'd
sure
entertain
that-
simple.
that would be great.
And even, and something about, beyond code of conduct, I think we should have something, maybe not quite like what we have in our meetings, but there needs to be the not personal attacks and the civility thing. And that's not necessarily subsumed under Roberts or whatever else we put. So I think that that's maybe something that ought to be in there as well, just in case. We can't plan for the best, we need to plan for the worst.
You have to play nice in the sandbox. Is that
Basically,
that
that's it.
Yeah, okay.
So we're running out of time.
Yeah, we are running out of time, so I think we're going to have to wrap this up here.
The one thing that we didn't address that I think we really should is how the application process and the appointment process. I really think that needs to be nailed down.
And
So
we
there's no
also-
confusion moving forward.
And we also neglected the liaison position and responsibilities, which I'd like to see on here, in the discussion also.
So I think we have direction on what to go for as far as the committees, and then I can reschedule this advisory committee policy, the appointment and application process for another work session.
Along with the rest.
Okay. Yeah.
We have one last thing.
I think he said he's going to bring it up at another meeting, but just so it's on the record, the first sentence on the 3rd page, when an appointed seat on the committee is vacant, the mayor, with approval of the Board of Trustees, shall select new members to the committee based on the following. That had been, as I understand, some age-old practice, but it violates the code, and I am a firm believer in the code that this resides solely with the Board of Trustees in an open meeting.
And
So-
it always has been. So I just for clarity, the reason, what happens is that mayors, not just me, but mayors in general have suggested candidates to the board, and typically the board then would, you always vote on it, so it's always in an open meeting. So it's never done behind any, it's always done during a regular meeting. So, but if people want to vote individually on individual candidates, that's fine too. It was just a way of trying to prevent the thing that might happen, which would be like, oh, well, he likes me, but she doesn't like me, and that's going to cause hard feelings. But if that's not the way the board wants to proceed, then that's fine too.
I'm totally for 100% transparent, and the recommendations via internet to the mayor is totally non-transparent. It may or may, the name that comes forward may or may not reflect the opinion of the board, and then it comes to the committee. It's just discombobulated. I say 1 vacancy, 1 vote per trustee, 2 vacancies, 2 votes per trustee, et cetera.
Certainly fine.
I'd like to also add
I
that,
second that.
I'd like to add that we should specifically solicit and request input from the committee chair and any committee members on candidates, and should formally enter into our consideration.
And I don't think the committee member or chair has any voting power, so I want to make sure that that doesn't
It
occur.
formally enters into our recommendations.
Right, well, they can't vote, so it's not an issue, so.
But it became an issue. This is what we're trying to avoid, I think. We're trying
No,
to
well, just to be clear, it did, this is a totally different concept that we can talk about in the future, but nobody voted. People gave me what their idea of who they wanted. I tallied that up and then put that out as a recommendation. If that's not I don't care. I have no skin in the game, so if people don't want to do that, then
Right.
no big deal.
I think it's easier to vote it just like we did transparently in front of the cameras, in front of everybody.
Totally
knows what
fine.
they're voting for, so there's no misunderstanding behind the scenes, that's all.
Yeah,
So I would-
sounds completely reasonable.
I completely agree.
Okay, so we're going to have to wrap this up because we have a meeting.
So,
starting,
May, I'm not understanding, there are a host of issues we have not gotten to. Are we going to have another work session on
We're going to
these?
have a work session on the appointment and application process.
And to maybe review whatever she
And
works
then,
on.
Other
We're
issues.
going to work to put together
Thank you.
the ordinance and the
Excellent.
resolutions that the board will see again.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
In a work session, not,
Yes.
Right.
okay.
So we're here at 7, so we'll take a 2-minute break and we'll start the regular meeting. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a Town of Superior Board of Trustees regular meeting for October 10th, 2011. And Phyllis, if you call the roll.
Sure. Mayor Andrew Muckle.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ela Gregoris.
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli, Chris Sampson.
Here.
Sandy Pennington. Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Lisa Skumatz.
Here.
Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magley.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Barberi.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Harder.
Great, thanks. That brings us to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Trustee Skumatz? Oh, no changes, so I'll entertain a motion by Trustee Skumatz, second by Trustee Gregoris to approve the agenda. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. That brings us to reports, questions, and issues. Anybody would like to start tonight?
I'll start.
Okay.
Yesterday afternoon, we started with ProStack. We started our community outreach for a community forum that's going to take place on October 19th. So anybody that we didn't get to see yesterday, we're going to go out again next weekend. But the meeting is to get your feedback for all residents that live south of Colton on what kind of parks, trails, other amenities that you'd like to see in town. This is your opportunity to give us your input on what you'd like to see. It's at El Dorado K8 from 6:30 to 7:30 on October 19th. I attended a Superior Elementary School SAC meeting, and we reviewed the draft of the UIP, or the United Improvement Plan. The UIP helps the schools identify academic achievement goals and then determine if they've met those goals and how to react if not. And some of the goals would be, of course, reading, writing, math, academic growth, and school climate, which has to do with anti-bullying. Currently working with the Historical Commission on a field trip for the entire second grade of Superior Elementary School. They're currently working on Superior history and also U.S. history, so we thought it would be a good idea to get the second grade down to Town Hall, the museum, and Grasso Park and really learn firsthand about the history of Superior, and that's going to take place November 1st. That's the day we've identified. So we'll split the group up. We're going to have about 100 students here. We'll split them up into thirds and have each one of them start at each different location and then rotate through until we're done. And then we possibly end the day with lunch in the park. And that's it.
Great, thanks. Trustee Skumatz.
I went to a policy meeting in the Colorado Municipal League where they looked at about 12 different pieces of legislation. I went to a Colorado Municipal League policy meeting where they voted on about 12 pieces of legislation that are pretty much by acclamation. And I'm happy to send that agenda and the amended agenda that we got at the meeting out to anyone who's interested. I went to a consortium of cities meeting that had a presentation that was not particularly strong on just some study that they had conducted on electric cars in the future, and I think it left a little bit desired. I hope that the folks who did that do a little bit better job. But they did recognize that Superior had an electric car spot and all that. But I will say I was a little disappointed that they had a map of where trips happen in Boulder County, and they had little arrows going to and from, completely omitted Superior. Put us as part of Louisville. It was really annoying. We're in the county. Yeah, it was really annoying. I brought forward a recommendation that one of the things that the consortium works on this next year is getting a trails map that for the application for Boulder County, the app, I guess, I want to call it an application, but that's not as well understood. An app that's supposed to bring up the trails in Boulder County, not only bring up the Boulder County-owned trails, but rather all the trails, and everybody liked that idea, so that will probably move forward. It looks like one of the other things that they might look at over the next few months is water issues. They try to bring forward things that have universal interest, and so I'll keep you posted. It was no more specific than that at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, I attended a couple of meetings. There was a meeting with Fish and Wildlife Service, the Department of Interior, discussing the Jefferson Parkway, and I'll let Trustee Williams go into detail about that one. And then the Metro Mayor's Caucus, which was mostly focused on economic development. The governor was there. I don't think there's really any particular take-home messages, but they invited communities, if they had particular things that they would like to see the state work with local communities, that they have a contact person for that. So that was kind of the highlight of the meeting. Thanks. Trustee Williams?
got to turn on my mic. Sorry about that. We got new mics. Hope you can hear me. I attended a RTD public hearing in Louisville last week, and RTD was supposed to discuss what the alternatives of what they might do with our bus route 228 as well as the Superior Call-in Ride. And instead, they just repeated more of the same, which was the public hearing we had had 2 weeks before that, stating that they were going to eliminate the Superior Call-in Ride and reroute the 228 bus. Now, we did at the hearing last week get RTD to look at the 228 and actually, through Superior, not change the route whatsoever. I'm pretty confident that that's what they're going to do, but, then again, you never know. So I'm, cautiously optimistic and apprehensive and all of those words. So we'll just have to see what where they come up with next. Also, and I think we've put it on our website, or we're sending out an e-blast. We're sending out an e-blast. There are 3 elected officials that are on RTD that it would be really good for residents as well as the board to send an email in support for the Superior Call-in Ride as well as the 228 bus and keeping the bus route as it is. The more we hear from residents sending to these 3 elected officials through RTD, when you get this e-blast, if you have the time, take a minute and send an email of support, and hopefully, we can make a difference and actually change what their actual original plan is, and that's to eliminate the Superior Call Ride and reroute the 228. So, I went to a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service meeting. They didn't exactly unveil the draft environmental assessment, but they discussed it. And I have just a little bit of information that I can give you. They already did release it. I'm not going to go in depth. It's probably 50 pages at least. And you can certainly read it on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Rocky Flats website. Just Google it and you'll find it. They determined that there were 4 alternatives that they were looking at and for the future management of Rocky Flats Refuge. And they chose what they called Alternative B. And Alternative B states, expand the administrative boundary of the refuge and complete a land exchange for holdings at the refuge. And I'll just say in layman terms, that means expand Rocky Flats Wildlife Refuge with the acquisition of Section 16, which is a square piece of land that's on the corner of 93 and 72. And then also sell off the right-of-way, which is about a 300-foot strip of land that is just west, adjacent to Indiana. So with that, they stated there were 2 applications for this right-of-way that have been submitted, and those applications, the first one is the what we're calling the Jefferson Parkway Toll Road. Their application is acquire Section 16 for the expansion of Rocky Flats Wildlife Refuge, purchase the right-of-way for a bike path and a toll road. So they did change their application over the course of time. And then the second application did change as well, and that was from Golden, and that is to acquire the right-of-way for a bike path. And that's it. So based on that, if you just kind of put 2 and 2 together, Alternative B, application, the first application I mentioned with the toll road fulfills alternative B pretty nicely, whereas the Golden's application does not fulfill that because there is no expansion of Rocky Flats. They're not offering that. They're only offering a bikeway and purchasing the right-of-way. So we'll just have to see where this all goes. We're hoping that an environmental assessment really is going to lead to an environmental impact statement, which is a much more in-depth look at a lot of the issues that are surrounding that whole area and what the use of the right-of-way would be in terms of whether it's a bikeway or whether it's a toll road. So anyway, we'll see where that goes.
So just a couple of comments about that. So I agree that the way that this looked is that they're clearly preferring the Jefferson Parkway application. They said that they were going to look into the legislative intent of the Rocky Flats Act, which clearly speaks to a highway being built. And they said the no action alternative, which is one of these environmental impact statement requirements, is that they're going to transfer the land for transportation purposes, and so not building is not something is not an option. So I think I think it's becoming more and more clear that what they're going to do is transfer the land to the Jefferson Parkway Highway Authority for the toll road construction. They also said that this land, they mentioned over and over again that it was felt to be safe to do any construction of anything without any further remediation being done. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a struggle. So,
and
thanks.
to quote them, they gave us 3 findings, and one of them is there is no potential public exposure to plutonium, and therefore any construction on the right-of-way will not be a public safety concern. I clearly have a problem with that statement, as I'm sure the public will probably look at that as well. They also said on another finding is the right-of-way will not be analyzed in this draft environmental assessment that they just sent out because it has already been analyzed for impact to the refuge in the 2005 Rocky Flats National Wildlife Refuge final conservation plan. It goes on and on, the name of it. But and then they also determined that neither application, 1 or 2, has any significant impact to the refuge. So they're not going to evaluate that. And at this point, U.S. Fish and Wildlife expects the current applications to change or evolve over time as this draft EA is released, and which recently was released and evaluated. So we'll see where these applications go in the future.
Thank you, Trustee Gregorius.
I'm not
Yeah,
done.
Mark. Okay.
Sorry. I also went to a Boulder County Commissioner meeting for the Hodgkin-Harris Reservoir approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Superior. And that was last week, and they approved it unanimously, which was great. So we have a great partnership with Boulder County, and very excited to see where that all goes in the future and what other partnerships we can do with Boulder County. Also, I wanted to bring up one other issue. The meeting sign-up procedures that we see in the beginning of our agenda, have we discussed that? Is that something we're going to discuss today?
I made that change on the last agenda and mentioned, but I didn't hear anything from any of the board members.
Right, we didn't discuss it.
So you can
Okay.
send me your comments out.
All right.
Or we can talk about them tonight. How we-
Well, I actually kind of like how the state capitol is handling it, where it is a 5-minute limit. It's not necessarily timed. I mean, it can be timed. We can alter that depending on how many are there to speak for that particular issue. The sign-up sheet, there would be a sign-up sheet with, a box to check whether you support, oppose, or you're neutral, your name, your address, your issue. And then the sheets would be given to the clerk, and then the mayor would read the names as they approach. Much like, Boulder does in their city council meetings. I think Louisville does that as well.
Louisville doesn't ask for a position.
Okay. Well, no, they don't. What?
Louisville does what, Lisa? I didn't hear.
That is true, they do not.
Oh, pro or con? Okay.
But I do
So-
like the sign up.
Didn't we discuss that before, that
No.
we would, I thought we did talk about that if we had a big crowd, that we would go to that, since we don't have a lot of people that come in with discussion items, that keep it the way it is. But whenever we do have a big crowd, then we would.
If I can share what happened in Traffic and Safety Committee tonight, which I thought was a good model, actually. Kurt did some sort of sign up, and I think it provides a great list for contact. For example, in the case of, and I'll report on it in mine, in the case of the Ridge, there were probably 5 people here. It's the core now of a working group to come up with solutions to that issue because of the sign-up and contact information. Kurt's got everything he needs now to activate that. So actually, a sign-up sheet does serve the purpose of having perhaps the email address and/or phone number there for follow-up. So there wasn't? He'll find it. But if we enhanced it with contact info, at least he knows the names of the people, et cetera. But if we enhanced it with contact info, I think it's just good info to have.
Let's, can we spend part of a work session to talk about this as opposed to trying to hammer that out tonight, so.
I agree.
Okay. Trustee Williams, or
I'm done.
Trustee Gregoris?
So, first I want to address those that are watching on television. If you hear a lot of background noise, there's nothing wrong with your TV set. We have a whole bunch of Cub Scouts out here that are being pretty active, so. I was going for a walk today, and I noticed that there's one sign that has graffiti. It's pretty new, because I take that path almost multiple. I did not.
Like, use your phone, your iPhone?
I didn't
take
have
a
my
picture?
phone with me, no. But it's basically, if, like, behind Stoneham, the open space, pretty close to the bridge in 88th, and it's the back of the sign, not the front of the sign. So, anyway, that's just FYI. Attended a meeting with other citizens of the community who are, we've been meeting probably about once a month to discuss how to bring about a community center to the town of Superior, and I think we're making good progress, and at some point we'd like to bring some of that information in front of the board. And I attended the transportation and safety meeting this evening, and we had the fullest agenda. I've been on this committee for 4 years. I don't think we've ever had as full of an agenda as we did today. And basically, we had 4 core issues. The biggest one, not in terms of importance, but how many people attended, has to do with the Ridge. The people that have lived there have, I think, felt somewhat disconnected from the rest of the town, and given that McCaslin is like the River Nile, basically, of transportation between them and the rest of us. So we have a robust discussion. I think staff has been given 30 days to come up with some alternatives, both short-term and long-term. And Matt, I don't know if you want to address that specifically.
Well, what we'll do is we'll put together our notes from the meeting and send them out to the entire board.
The second issue was on 88th, close to the bridge, with kids going to Monarch. And those lights are LED, and they're not very visible. Most people don't stop, honestly. Kids are crossing they take the sidewalk as they ride their bikes on the west side of 88th, and then cross over to the east side. It is pretty dangerous. I take that twice a day, every day, and I see cars just going past, even though there are kids sitting there on their sidewalks, off their bikes, waiting to cross. So I think we need to come up with something that's much more visible. Then Rochelle talked about Sagamore, and I don't know if you've driven around Sagamore and have seen it's a very dense neighborhood, obviously. People park this way and this way in the corners. I mean, it's, even if you're going 15 or 20 miles an hour through the neighborhood, there's some parts of it that are pretty dangerous. So we have talked about the easiest solution for now is to paint some parts of some corners, the 90-degree angles yellow, no parking in essence, and try that for 2 or 3 streets and see if that minimizes the threat. I mean, this has been an issue for 10 years, so I think the time to do something is now. And the last one is Michelle brought up El Dorado K through 8. Is it Torrey Peak? Behind? Yeah. That's not behind the school, which a lot of people don't want to go the Indiana route because they figure it's easier to go behind the school, but that creates its own set of problems. And again, too many cars parked too close to the intersection, to the stop signs. So that needs to be addressed as well. So we had just a very, very busy.
We had when we were out and about in that neighborhood yesterday, delivering the information about the ProStack meeting. It's several residents that commented on that. So it's not just a couple of residents. It's south of Colton wide.
Yep.
So I was brainstorming the other day about the problem with crossing at 88th, and the issue we have is that motorists actually don't stop for people in crosswalks, which, well, some do, some don't. Flashing lights or not, which is always a shame, but it seems to be the nature of the world out here. It might, not even when there's a crossing guard person there, yes. But so I wonder if a solution to the 88th problem would be for Louisville or Superior in conjunction with Louisville to build a sidewalk.
Yeah, that's what we talked
down
about.
there, because
exactly.
the problem is
Exactly what we discussed.
you walk to the bridge and you have to cross over because
right.
there's no sidewalk on the Louisville side. So
The one thing we can do on the Superior side is on the east side of 88th to build from Rock Creek Parkway, have a sidewalk so they just go straight to Monarch. They never have to go across, basically. That's one way to do it.
Well, and part of the issue is a lot of these kids actually ride their bikes, and you know their parents don't feel that it's safe to ride on the street, so they'd rather ride on the sidewalk, and there isn't a sidewalk, so they have to cross, go on the west side, then cross again and go on the east side, which poses a lot of safety issues with the traffic.
Even when the lights are on, I mean, I've had times where I've stopped because there are kids on their bikes ready to cross, and I'm heading down from the bridge, and I stop coming into Superior. But people leaving Superior, even though a car is parked, stopped, the kids are there, they just go straight through. And I've had to honk to tell the kids, don't cross, even though I'm stopped. I mean, it's just crazy that just people are in a hurry or just selfish or just unaware. I don't know what the deal is, but so.
great, thanks. Anything else? Trustee Pennington?
And magnify that situation, I was at Traffic Safety Committee too, at the Ridge, trying to cross McCaslin. So whatever you've got at 88, make it 10 times worse or 100 times worse for those people from the Ridge trying to cross over on McCaslin. So, great meeting, and we'll be hearing back within 30 days on all these issues and moving ahead on them. I was also with Deb and Joe and Beth, our assistant town manager, at the RTD meeting. And Deb, did you mention that they told us that 228 was going to stay unchanged? Okay.
They did say that at that meeting, at the public hearing.
So we're holding them to it because it was a public meeting, lots of witnesses in the audience. And so Deb has suggested that we actually put the bus shelters for that bus stop back in the 2012 preliminary budget, and I'd like to proceed as if that thing's gonna stay. So we've decided to put the what's it called? Call and write information over CAC, over e-blast on the town website. Definitely, we should be very proud. This was a Louisville meeting at Louisville Rec, and we definitely had the bulk of the attendance at that meeting. Lots of comment from Superior residents. So if RTD is interested in listening to us, they certainly heard from us on all aspects of the issue, and I would strongly encourage anybody who is at all interested in the call-in ride, or may be interested, because your kids are getting older, they're going to be going to junior high and high school, et cetera, where you may trust them riding separately, please register your comments with the RTD. I don't know if anybody's mentioned, a couple of days after the last board meeting, we sat down with the committee chairs, trustees, and liaisons to all the advisory committees. We're trying to hammer out a good, solid plan for our advisory committees. It was the subject of our work session today. Progress is being made on that front. I've contacted or sent a couple emails to my fellow trustees and town staff on this debate with the Secretary of State, who wants to send ballots only to active voters, which could have profound effects on Superior, because we have a large number of inactive voters, because we had an off-season election last time, and those who didn't vote in that are now relegated to inactive status. So you got my email, and I don't know, Phyllis, did you already contact the BOCO clerk, or is that in the works? But I think we've got to be quite aggressive with that. I think it's up to the BOCO clerk to declare, Boulder County clerk to declare whether or not she's a she, right, wants to send ballots to all voters, all registered voters, or will abide by the Secretary of State's opinion that they should be sent only to active voters. And I strongly encourage us to be on the side of sending to all registered voters. So I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I figured you'd bring it up tonight, and then I
Okay.
wanted to make sure.
So is this head nod time, or how do we do
This is
that?
the subject of litigation, as you know.
Right, but the first judge overruled the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State says he's going to keep fighting so he can send ballots out to just a small group rather than a large group. I can't figure out why he's Secretary of State.
What's the thinking behind that legally?
I can.
Honest answer.
Yeah, I do want the honest answer. What's the thinking? Because that limits democracy in a lot of ways.
It limits.
Disenfranchising a certain group of voters.
Right, okay.
Right,
That's,
that he would like to
I want it
disenfranchise.
on the record, that's all.
Yeah.
Right. So can we have a head nod? Are we
Yes.
in agreement?
Of course.
Of course.
Okay, good. Matt, I'm assuming you're going to bring the monument sign up in presentation,
Yes,
so we
we
can
need to talk
discuss that. Kendra, on the Hodgson-Harris Reservoir Agreement last meeting, we approved it sort of with the attitude that it would be amended to make clear who has the authority over declaring that 20-acre feet, and whether or not we need it or we're willing to give it up. We were going to be very specific about that language, that we decide that issue.
No, those weren't the edits that we made.
Actually, it was that we were going to have the water attorney look at the resolution to make sure that it had that option in there, correct?
Right.
The edits that I made were to transfer some of that wording that was present in one section to two other sections, which is exactly what we did.
Are we protected that we have the control over determining whether or not we have 20-acre feet to put
Yes, that's
into
water
the
attorney
equation?
part of it, yes.
Okay. And then I wanted follow-up on, it was requested after the Boulder District Attorney did his presentation and Jane did her presentation, that we have a seminar here on ID theft. So I want to make sure that's not forgotten.
Yeah, that's
about.
already been in contact with the
Great.
office.
Excellent. As Superior Go request, have we had more sign-ups since that article was in the newsletter?
I don't.
That's shaken.
Yeah, we had several
Right.
responses.
And I would strongly encourage that we keep promoting that, because I think this is one of those slow growth things, but as soon as it catches on, we'll have the whole community helping us determine, the state of our roads, et cetera. And then just a footnote on Deb's Jefferson Parkway issue. Things are looking a little bit problematic for us, but I wanted to assure the town that that doesn't mean we're rolling over and playing dead on this. We've got options. We're going to be discussing those options and hopefully, coming up with something that's best for this town. So we're not just accepting this Fish and Wildlife Service initial recommendation. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Magley?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. We have a new tenant in Superior Point. It's an advertising agency, so that's good. Level 3 has acquired a Global Crossing, so I'm not sure how that plays out with their plans for the campus. Hopefully that, we'll plan into our discussions with them. The new bridge at 3 Parks, that urban drainage was installed today, actually. So if you get a chance, go down and take a look. That was mentioned. And then we did receive one proposal for a promoter for the bike race. But the companies, they got experience running these type of big events, and we are familiar with them, and so Martin's getting discussions with them on the details of what an agreement might look like, and we'll keep you apprised of how that looks at some point in the future here. It'll come to the board for consideration. So that, we were very happy to receive it.
I have just one follow-on. Oh, sorry, were you done?
No, well, I've got one more item.
Okay, go ahead, please.
And then the last item I had was to show the board, let's see. I sent out an email over the weekend with regard to the proposed changes to the line of signing, and had requests from some of the board members to show it tonight. And we received 2 comments from the Rock Creek HOA board on it, which I forwarded to the board as well, and had questions or discussion with regard to this. Happy to take it.
Trustee Williams?
Sure. I would kind of like to see a master plan of some sort on signage for the town. It seems like we started out with some signage that was on McCaslin as you come from Louisville, and that is a flagstone sign that has signage wording on it. Now, if we're not, I feel that we need continuity throughout the town. Is kind of what I'm really gearing here on. And I realize that these are different, and they have been different, but I think having a master plan to see where we're going with all these signs would be a very good idea, instead of just putting them up, piecemeal along the way when they are due.
So I think we're talking about 2 different types of signs. We're talking about the existing signs that are already you see throughout Rock Creek, and changing them to, well, not all of them, but the ones I mentioned, Rock Creek, McCaslin, Christensen, and Indiana. And then new monument signs, which is what you refer to on McCaslin as you first enter town. And then there's 2 others that are proposed, one at 128 and one at Colton, which the developer would build for the town. So, I mean, the format that the staff is going off of for existing signs on major collectors is what you see there, and what you see at the 2 pools. And so that was, and we started this process about 3 years ago with the Hillside sign, which is at El Dorado and Indiana. But it's the same, similar dimensions, exact same dimensions, depending on the size of the line sign. So that's kind of how we proceeded. We're planning on proceeding in the future.
Matt, is this a done deal already? Or?
No.
Yeah. It seems like it's not a good use of resources at this time, because this is just this sign alone, just the one would cost us how much?
There's the 2 corners.
Okay, so it would cost us, what was it?
$22,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. I don't know. That's my big concern. Is that we could use those resources in other ways at this point.
I think we need to have a discussion like on this, maybe part of a work session, Because there's not unanimity on the board. I think there's concern about the cost, the size of the signs.
The size of Superior, town of Superior, that's Rock Creek, it looks like that's Superior up there. So that was another concern, too.
Like, to me, the town of Superior being that big, that would be great up by 128 if you're coming in from the south, as you're entering the town, so that people know you're entering the town. But
And we got to this point, I mentioned it at our meeting with the Rock Creek HOA board. I didn't have any graphics at that time, but so that's how we got to this point.
Right. Matt, if I might suggest, it went to the HOA board, but it didn't go to the town board, and I think perhaps it should have. So I'm with...
I understand. So I mentioned it at joint dinner, and then I included it in last week's digest, which was my plan.
Okay.
And then based on if any feedback or none.
Okay.
And so that's how we're here
Okay.
tonight.
well, you're getting some feedback.
Right. I'm agreeing with all of the above. I think signage at the appropriate ingresses and egresses from town, particular ingresses, so people know they're in Superior, is appropriate. I like it along 36, where you have that sign now. The one at Deborah mentioned coming in from Louisville, I think, is tiny. I'd sort of like something, us to consider some options there. But I'm not so sold on entrances into Rock Creek as needing this type of expenditure, so I think it deserves separate discussion.
So we'll talk about this some more. I mean, the town has obviously put a lot of signs up already that have the town of Superior on it, at the pools, at Purple Park, at different communities, different neighborhoods within the town. So I guess we just need to let the town manager know if that's a project that we want not to do anymore. But we can discuss this at a work session sometime.
I think it needs, I have one shout out.
Trustee
Yeah,
Kumas?
so I have one,
No, go ahead.
on a different topic, I have one shout out for the town manager and for the Public Works, I guess, department, the Ask Superior item that I brought up. It was very nicely stepped through what happened and resolved appropriately. Thank you. I felt attended to.
Trustee Williams?
Oh, it just flew out of my mind what I was going to say. Because actually, I did want to at one point say something about that GO request, which is Ask Superior. I noticed when we were discussing it, there were a lot of people sitting in the audience kind of going, huh, what's that? And I think there's a lot of residents that aren't exactly sure what it is, and maybe we should, every time we're here, give a little synopsis of what it is very quickly. It's a phone app that you can download to your iPhone or your Android, and through that phone app, you can report issues that you see throughout your town. That goes directly to the town and then is tracked, and you get an automated message immediately saying, we're looking at your issue. And then as time goes, you continue to get information about your issue, and then when it's resolved, you can actually use your camera on your phone if you have a camera. Most iPhones and Androids do. So you can take a picture of the issue and then send that in as well through the app. So it's a great little feature for our town to track issues or theft or pothole in the street, parking issues behind El Dorado, graffiti, anything.
Okay, thanks. Anything else from the town manager, town attorney?
Nothing, thanks.
Town clerk. So if the board is would give me a little latitude here, I'd like to move the presentations up before the public comment, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
So I don't see any particular concerns, so maybe you could grab the bunch from the lobby.
Where would you like us to go?
That is awesome. Hey guys, thanks for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. So, Mr. Magley, do you want to give us a little intro here?
So, tonight we glad to have the Boy Scout Troop Pack 278 with us tonight. We had our 9/11 event in remembrance of that event, and trustees Hanson and Pennington helped organize that event and had volunteers, including Boy Scouts and other residents, come down and help us paint, or not paint, but apply linseed oil to our historic buildings in Grasso Park. So it sounded like it was a great event, a great day for it, and just happy the Boy Scouts here to recognize them for their work, not only in that project, but as others as well, and I think you have a proclamation for them.
I do, and I'd like to read it. And actually, for the town manager, if we could I get addresses for the boys here so we could send them also the proclamation? That would be fantastic. So if you could connect maybe with the town manager. So with that, I'd like to read a proclamation of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior in appreciation of Superior Volunteer Service of Cub Scout Pack 278 and Boy Scout Troop 278, whereas the Cub Scout Pack 278 and the Boy Scout Troop 278 are active contributors to our society by volunteering their time and talents and improving and strengthening the town of Superior community. And the volunteers participated in the September 11th National Day of Service and Remembrance Community Project in conjunction with the Superior Historical Commission to apply linseed oil to the fence and historic structures located in Grasso Park, and thus preserving the structure's aesthetic and historic value. And Cub Scout Pack 278 and Boy Scout Troop 278 have consistently been involved in community events and demonstrated a sustained commitment to volunteer service. And Cub Scout Pack 278 and Boy Scout Troop 278 are commended for their dedicated efforts to help our community become a better place to live. Therefore, I, Andrew Muckle, Mayor of the Town of Superior, and the Board of Trustees do hereby proclaim its appreciation to Cub Scout Pack 278 and Boy Scout Troop 278 for all their significant contribution to the community, and encourage all citizens to follow the example that this fine organization has shown us on the act of volunteerism. With that, thank you very much.
Guys, are you seeing your pictures up there? See behind the Cub Master? Phyllis, could we trim that light? Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Isn't that great, you guys? You guys worked hard. You did a good job, everybody. Oh, my goodness.
So I'm hoping that we can maybe take a couple of pictures, maybe, and have parents have the opportunity to.
Sure.
Can we run that?
Yes. That would be great.
Matt, can we run that again? Can we run it again since the boys weren't watching?
Tall ones in the back. Younger boys in the front. Good, good, good. All back here. Okay. Evo's in the back, that's right. Evo's on the back.
I can watch it.
Okay, awesome. Everybody ready for some pictures? Yeah. Everybody look at Jim right there first. Look right here. One. Big smiles, everybody. buddy. Be proud. Great. You guys all set? All right, that's great. All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dave.
Nice to meet you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Andrew, can we recognize one more person of that group, too?
Sure.
We wanted to recognize Clint and Cora Randall, who also helped organize it, but they took all the pictures of the day, so thank you very much to Clint and Cora Randall.
Great, thanks. So we'll take a 30-second break here. Yes. All right. Very good. Well, that was very nice. So I think we'll move what was public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. Yep.
George Kuffner, 7520 West Cochrane. I'd like to talk about the budget stuff. Do you want me to talk now or wait until it comes up on number 9?
If it has to do with the issues on item 9, I guess I'd wait till then.
It's issues on this paper.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
George Kuffner, Superior. I have a question for the board. What is the intent of the Rocky Mountain Fire Protection District doing with the getting on the ballot to remove their term limits for their offices? Do anyone know anything about this?
This gets to a point where I think it'd be helpful if we could somehow televise some of their meetings, because I think that there's not a lot of information about it, and maybe somebody here on the board knows anything about that, but I certainly don't.
Is this Rocky Mountain Fire or the Boulder County Sheriff?
No, it's in the paper that come out in
As
the
Rocky
Boulder
Mountain
Camera.
Fire.
It says Rocky Mountain Fire Protection District, question 5D, removal of term limits of their board. I think everybody should be mailed a notification that this is on the board, on the ballot. People voted these term limits in for a reason, not for somebody to sit on the board for 10 years, 20 years, whatever they wish. I'm thoroughly disgusted that I didn't get a notification in the mail like other people have, and I should get one for all the properties I own, not just one because I'm an individual. I appreciate if the board would look into this and get some information out to people about this term limitation. We do have state laws that says that people are term limited in their positions. I don't think it's fair. I went down there over a year ago and asked them a question after my brother passed away, and I've never received any answers to the questions I asked. So why should they sit longer on the board? That's my reason right there. I'm glad to see the public comments on number 5 changed to include the town board on most of the questions on that little square bit. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Additional public comment? Seeing none, that brings us to item number 7, consent agenda. And on the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of September 26, 2011 Board of Trustees meeting, acceptance of the minutes of the Historical Commission and Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Advisory Committee meetings, approval of a liquor license renewal for Chuck E. Cheese Restaurant. And I think that's it. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Williams, second by Trustee Kokuris. Discussion. Not spending money. All in favor? Great. Unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 8, a public hearing and adoption of a resolution approving an extension of the final development plan for Ethan Allen. It is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. And Phyllis, you have proof of publication?
I do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The town has received an application by Ethan Allen, who's the applicant, to extend their final development plan that was approved on May 14th, 2007 originally, for another 18 months, or a year and 6 months. As I mentioned, their final development plan was approved by the town on May 14th, 2007. They had submitted back on April 26, 2010, our first request to extend their final development plan for 18 months, which was granted by the town at that time, and it is now set to expire on October 26, 2011. And so the applicant is asking for another extension due to their application had mentioned the state of the economy and their inability to build, and the value of having a final development plan approved for their site in marketing, and also if the economy turns around, they may still have interest to build on that site. Just some information about the project. Ethan Allen was approved final development plan within the Superior Marketplace for an 18,974 square foot store on Major Pad 8, which is just south of the Costco parking lot, right off of 5th Avenue. It had four-sided architecture with their standard corporate logo, and the shared parking that's shared between that pad and the existing shops on Center Drive. I believe the applicant is here. If they have any additional comments you'd like to make to the board, or if the board has any questions for them.
Very good. Comments from the applicant?
No.
Name and business address, if you would.
I'm Elaine Harris, and I'm the Colorado State Manager for Ethan Allen, 19655 East 35th Avenue, Aurora. And we certainly, when we purchased this land back in '07, we certainly felt that it would be a great partnership for the town of Superior and Ethan Allen. We still feel that it's a terrific location. What has happened with the economy, though, at this moment, we just feel like building would not give the town of Superior the revenue or Ethan Allen the revenue to be successful. So hopefully you will grant us the extension, as we are still very, very interested, and we think it'll be a good partnership.
Great. Thank you very much. Questions from the board? Trustee
Yes.
Williams?
So I was reading here that you do have a potential buyer.
We do have a potential buyer. It's nothing that's cemented, of course, right now, but I think with this extension, it would be good for not only for Ethan Allen if we built within 18 months, but for any potential buyer out there as well.
And would it be another furniture store?
Yes. Yes.
Other questions from the board? So, I'm sorry, Trustee Pennington.
I have one for anybody who knows the answer, Matt, maybe. What if we don't approve this? What becomes the situation?
Well, on October 26th, if they haven't submitted an application for a building permit, then their development plan would expire, and they would start the process over.
Or they would choose not to. Is that correct?
Right, or they would just sell the pad to somebody else, and they would start the process.
Trustee Skumatz.
So just to be clear, if another applicant, if it was sold, they would have to either come in substantially the same as this FDP, or else they'd have to start over.
Well, they would come in either substantially the same with, depending on the type of modifications they want to make to the plan, it may require an amendment to the final development plan that would go through the planning commission and then the town board. If there are minor changes, then they could be approved administratively by me, but we'd have to take a look at what those changes would be.
Trustee Williams?
With the final development plan, does it have any criteria of who the retail applicant is? No. It does. So it can be any retail.
Is it strictly retail, though? Or
Retail, as long as it's an allowed use within the Superior Marketplace Plan development, but otherwise.
It's like a restaurant or?
Right.
So I'll just ask you a straight-up question. So when do you think you might decide whether or not you're going to use that ad for your own business or for Ethan Allen's business?
You know, I think the extension was for 18 months. I would say within 6 to 12 months.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Pennington?
And when was the last time you actually opened a new Ethan Allen in this part of Colorado?
We opened South Plains or Johnstown? Which one's new? Johnstown, about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
I mean, are you more interested in keeping it or selling it to somebody else, if the right
We
buyer?
really want to keep it, because as I said earlier, I think, you know, it's a great location, and I think the town of Superior is the way we really would like to go, but we want to be successful when we do it.
I understand.
Okay. Any public comment regarding this issue?
George Kuffner, 7520. Is there any money, if we just give them this extension, it's free gratis? Or if we let it expire, make somebody else go through the process again, it will pay revenues that way? We've already given one extension, right?
Well, the town doesn't make any, I mean, we don't generate any revenue off the development review process. Any revenue that the applicant pays goes to help pay our review fees to our consultants. So if we don't incur any expenses either if there's no application.
But say they do sell it, and if somebody has to come in with a new proposal to us, the town board and the staff will be able to say, we want this style of building, or this and this and this, to where the way it is now, is they sell it to somebody, you pretty much come in and they got to build pretty close to what they've already got. Well, we may not want that, if, you know, depending on the type of store that came in. She thinks it may be a furniture store, but it's whoever's got the biggest dollar. And we may not, for that application of business, we may not want that kind of building.
Well, if there are major changes, then they have to do an amendment to the final development plan, which would go through the process.
I just feel that as a town, we'd have more control making them start over. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Additional public comment regarding this issue? Board comment regarding this issue?
What's the time frame? If somebody had to start over again, what's the time frame to get a new plan development in place? Approval and all that?
Typically, it's 4 to 6 months, depending on, you know, 'cause we have a set of design guidelines that are already set up. If they come in and meet those pretty much from the start, then it's a quicker process. If we have to go back and forth with them because they want, you know, things added that aren't necessarily within the design guidelines, then it takes long because there's back and forth.
Okay, so the plan development that's in place, you're saying that could actually be transferred to a new owner if it stayed in place? And then if they want to make changes, then they just make the changes that suit them within certain parameters?
Right, correct. Yep.
So,
Trustee Williams?
so realistically, either voting for this or voting against it is not going to assure a retail outfit coming in any sooner. It's kind of how I'm seeing it.
No, actually, so let's say they have a buyer who, the building architecture that they have approved, they want to keep it as is. All they want to do is maybe change some colors of the, you know, the signs, and, well, of course, the name of the sign, and I think the canopies on here are blue. If they wanted to change those wouldn't take a major amendment.
So what is the potential, if we vote on this, or vote for it, that Ethan Allen will be selling it to a potential buyer in the next year?
I think she stated 6 to 12 months, they would know.
Other board
to me, it
comments?
sounds like
So it's not a commitment at this point?
Trustee Gregorius?
I mean, to me, it sounds like there's no real active buyer that's knocking on the doors to purchase this property from Ethan Allen. So,
Trustee Skumatz?
It seems to me that if the economy were to get better, to be able to react quickly with a plan that's already in place benefits both sides. I suspect that if the town manager is sensitive enough to what we might consider major, that he would come back to us for something that would mean a substantial change that would affect our opinions about the FDP. So I feel comfortable with this.
Trustee Hamilton? Trustee Pennington?
I'm inclined to agree with Lisa that it's just one hurdle that a new, should it be a new buyer, doesn't have to go through. However, there is, to me, a price impact here. To me, there is, a buyer probably will pay more for this pad with an FDP already on it than they wouldn't without it. And I'm wondering if, in fact, that's the case, and have we ever tried to quantify what price increment that is?
I have not, but...
Do you agree with my logic, or is
Yes.
my logic wrong?
No, I agree.
Okay.
I guess I haven't had any comments. And I guess my general recommendation would be to approve this extension. In general, I'm not in favor of these things, and this is the second extension, and so it causes me a little bit of heartburn. But I see very little downside to this because of either they'll use it for their own use, and so then it's already been completed, and there's no delay in opening a store. And if they sell it and they have major modifications, going to go through the process anyway. And so I think it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. And if we can help facilitate a business transaction for a business to come into town, I guess I'm generally in favor of that. Trustee Pennington.
So, Matt, based on your economic development efforts, have we had any other entity or entities interested in that particular pad at all?
We haven't received any calls.
Okay.
Staff has not.
So you don't feel that having it in the current status is hindering interest in any way?
No, I mean, we have 2 additional pads in addition to this one that are
Of the same size, similar?
They're a little bit, they're smaller pads, but, Blackstone, Centro, Brixmore, who's, they're all the same company now, but they haven't had any luck in this current time that we're in, getting those properties sold either.
And last question, do we have to do this in 18-month increments, or can we do it for a year? Can we say 12 months, and that's that?
Do it as long as you like.
Yeah. I mean, as boards, you have the discretion to make it less.
Trustee Williams.
And just to give me an idea of how large this pad is, how does it compare to like Sports Authority? Close in size?
No, it's smaller.
It's much smaller?
It's much smaller.
Half the size?
Well, how about, why don't we have the applicant, if they know the size of the store? Do you have that access right now?
Well, I've got that information, I just,
Well, that's the
visually, I'm not sure what the size is.
I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, but it's a 20,000 square foot showroom.
To compare it as far as to our store in Westminster.
I'm sorry, would you mind coming to the mic? I apologize. Thank you.
I've been to that store.
Just to give you something to compare
I'm
to.
sorry,
First of all, my
Nick.
name is Leo Chavez. I'm the design center manager of the Ethan Allen store in Westminster, Colorado.
Thank you.
To give you a comparison, I don't know if you've been to our store in Westminster at 101st and Wadsworth, but that store is 12,000 square feet. So this the proposed site is significantly larger at 18,900.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Trustee
Can,
Pennington?
if I can ask both of you, and just select who wants to answer, why is Ethan Allen a good fit for the town of Superior? Why should we be interested in Ethan Allen for the town?
Well, I think, from the standpoint, it helps as far as the revenue for you. We do, it's been tough as far as the last few years with the economy. But we're still a viable store. I mean, there's been a lot of furniture stores that have gone out of business. Casey Furniture, for example, as was one of the big ones that went out. But we're still a substantial store, and we do a lot of business in this area. And we pay taxes based on where it's delivered. So we still have a lot of customers that live in this area. We contribute taxes. We think it'd be very viable for us along 36.
I'm assuming somebody's done some demographic studies.
I was about to say, I think the demographic studies that we have show that your residents are very relative to our demographics, our caliber of a client, and therefore we know it'll be successful once the economy turns around.
Okay.
So you aren't concerned how close this one here is to the one in Westminster? Is that where it is? Off of Wadsworth?
This one will replace the one in Wadsworth.
It's a relocation.
Yes.
Place. That is a whole different ballgame. Okay.
And what do your statistics show in terms of pulling power? How many miles does a typical Ethan Allen store pull from?
Oh, gosh, about 45 mile radius.
This morning, or this afternoon before this meeting, I was out as far as with a customer that had purchased quite a bit from us out by the airport. So we go all the way from the airport up to Loveland, down to Denver.
So
Boulder, Superior, Louisville, Broomfield is our major market.
Educate me on where they are, where the ones are now. Westminster would cease to exist. Where are the
Westminster would
others?
cease to exist. Park Meadows, Centennial, Colorado Springs, and Johnstown.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize that this was going to replace Westminster. That changes the.
That, I feel the same way. I didn't understand that.
Trustee Hansen?
Just a quick question for Matt. This actually would be a good exercise for a firm like Buxton to help us on, because they would be able to identify if this is a good fit for this area. But is there any upside, Matt, to the town to not approve this?
Upside. If you wanted a different use at that pad.
Okay. And I had the same concern as Trustee Pennington did, that 18 months, tying up for another 18 months seemed like a long time to maybe we consider doing the 6 to 12-month period.
I guess my only thought about a six-month period is that they can't do anything within 6 months,
Right.
and so they'll be here again. So if you like their smiling faces, then that's what we should do. But otherwise, I'd push it out a little bit.
I mean, within 6 months, the decision could be made, but then it would take another 6 months to actually develop and build.
But it's still a possibility that you'll be selling this pad to a completely different retail outfit.
Possibility, yes.
Okay. Additional public comment regarding this? More board questions or comment regarding this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Board action regarding this issue? Anybody want to entertain a motion? Trustee Williams?
I'd like to make a motion for the Town of Superior Resolution number R-35, Series 2011, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an extension for the Ethan Allen Final Development Plan.
Motion by Trustee Williams. Is there a second? Trustee Skumatz, discussion regarding this?
Just is the board all on board with doing it for 18 months, or do we consider a different time frame?
Yeah.
But we can amend
that's
it if there's an appetite for an
I think the
amendment.
difference between 6 and 18 months is probably not significant, and so at least that would be my perspective.
I thought it was for 12.
It's for 18.
That's 18 months.
No, I mean, you were amending for 12. Were you considering?
Well, the resolution is 18 months, so.
Okay.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the applicant. So, that brings us to item number 9.
Thank you, Mayor. This last item on the agenda This is the board's policy discussion for the 2012 budget items that have been identified by the Finance Committee for full discussion by the town board. Finance Committee met on August 29th, and then had 3 additional meetings on September 12th, September 26th, and October 5th. I'm going to ask Paul Mills, our Finance Director, to come up and lead the discussion with regard to I think there's 4 policy items that have been identified in your packet. The first is regarding economic development, and there's 3 sub-items under there.
Yeah, Matt, if I may request, I don't recall the Finance Committee requesting that the vendor fee be a discussion item for this meeting, that we actually talked about having it pushed out and a discussion item that would impact the 2013 budget, not 2012, because we'd already been down this road several times and we voted on it.
Okay.
So I'd ask that we strike the vendor fee increase from this discussion and then move to the business retention program and economic development consultant.
Okay.
I second that.
All right. And then the second item, I'm just going to list them and then we'll start the discussion. There's consolidation of town administrative functions, our new positions requests that were submitted by staff, and then the last one is funding, how the town would like to fund new park amenities. So with that, the first policy item for the board is economic development, and we're going to scratch the vendor fee. We'll leave that at increasing to 2.22% in 2012, and then have additional discussion for the 2013.
I mean, in general, I'd like to see that we put a cap on this, but I'm not sure, otherwise we're just giving a...
Yeah, we can certainly have that discussion, but...
Right. If I can remind the board, we had this as a board action item, putting it into place at 2.2% beginning of January 1st, 2012, was approved by a 5-2 vote. I don't understand why it keeps being brought up as if the board did not vote on it already. It has been voted. Businesses are currently or have already put into place budgets, 2012 budgets relying on it. If we do this here, it opens up the door to opening up every other vote we've taken and revisiting it once it's been approved by the board. So I say we live with our vote and readdress it in 2013.
So that's fine, and I know Trustee Skumatz has a comment, but I suspect that Costco, Target, and the large retailers don't even know this discussion is going on. It doesn't impact them.
But we
at
had
all.
this discussion several months ago when we approved it 5-2.
Trustee Skumatz?
And nobody's disputing that. And all I think he was saying was that we're going to bring it up again perhaps in 2013 and rediscuss the cap, and that's all I was going to say as well.
Great.
Okay. The next item is the possible new business retention program. We've identified $75,000 in the 2012 budget that we would use to incentivize businesses within town they would apply, they would apply, let's scroll down to that section, to the town for funds which could be used to help them with marketing or energy efficiency rebates, maybe training, reimbursement for their staff, deferral of operating expenses, job expansion, business beautification programs, which is facade, sign, external building, parking lot, landscape improvements, those type of things. And if the board would like to see this type of program be developed and leave the money in here, what we would do from this point on, once we know the board's direction on this, we would work with staff and board members to develop what that program exactly looks like and then bring it back for the board for their approval. Sometime hopefully by the end of this year, if not early 2013, or 12, sorry.
Okay.
So,
Board comments regarding this particular issue? well, see, my comment is that I'm generally opposed to things like this. I know that other communities do this, and, I'm a big believer in the free economy, free market, that there are businesses that are going to survive are going to survive. And if we give them $1.50, it's not going to make a difference. I think $75,000 is, in my mind, not money well spent. But if it's the pleasure of the board, then we can put it in the budget and talk about it down the road. Trustee Skumatz?
And I think I'm willing to have a space in there, but it's got to be demonstrated pretty well when it actually comes for approval.
Trustee Hansen?
Yeah, I like allocating the funds to it, but understanding that we're going to have a nice discussion about this, about how they're going to be utilized. But having the funds available, knowing that we have the opportunity in the future, I think it's good. Yeah.
In general, I'm in agreement with you, Mayor. When the economy is great, nobody needs to be incentivized. But given the length of this recession, the difficulties we're having attracting new businesses, I think it could be money well spent. It depends how it's done. So, in general, I'm in favor of it at this time. 2, 3, 5 years from now, maybe not if the economy turns around.
So I think, unless the manager wants a vote, I think there's a general consensus that this will be left in here with a robust discussion with any program that would have money allocated out of this line. Trustee Williams?
I'm just curious where we came up with the... Sorry. I'm just curious where we came up with the 75,000. Do we have anything specific in mind? How did we come up with that?
That was a number that staff came up with, taking a look at the businesses in town that we have and trying to come up with an idea of how many might apply for these funds. We have several large retailers in town that probably I wouldn't see taking advantage of this program. But so an application we see as having a cap on what they can get, a maximum amount, and based on how many businesses, smaller businesses we have in town, we thought this was a good number to start with, and then depending on the success of the program or lack thereof, we can adjust that budget amount each year. But we thought this was a good starting amount for the program, and we knew we could adjust in future years.
And if I can just add to this discussion, inherent in any program to retain existing businesses is the fact we have to start talking to existing businesses. And by talking to existing businesses, we start a whole raft of positive benefits to this community. So I agree that a solid plan will have to be put in place. That solid plan will have to be vetted and approved. But in general, and particularly in this economy, I'm in favor of pro-action over inaction. So count me in on this one.
Okay. Next.
The next item under this topic is a $30,000 amount that we haven't identified in 2012 to, originally it was to hire an economic development consultant to assist us with identifying retailers, marketing the town, helping with staff with incentive packages if they're determined that they're needed, identifying businesses that are looking to relocate to this area, those type of activities. Most of the cities surrounding us have either a consultant on board or actually a staff position, so we thought we would hire somebody more of on a part-time basis, but to assist staff with that. And then after the budget was submitted or put together, we had staff and Trustee Hansen and Trustee Pennington was there. We had a meeting with a retailer group or marketing group called Buxton, which helps provide data and information to cities to identify what retailers would be successful in your corridor and assist with putting marketing material together and the data needed to promote the town. And since that presentation that they gave to the board, we had another similar type company contact us, and we're going to meet with them Tomorrow. So we would do an RFP if that's the way we decided to go, as well as an RFP for a consultant if this money's left in there.
Thank you. Board discussion regarding this? So I guess my general thoughts about this is that I would, if we did anything like this, I would want to see that there is a return on dollar investment, because I suspect cities and towns throughout here have their economic development person, which is spending FTE and getting nothing, or we'll have a consulting firm said, oh yeah, you really need to get that company here, and that's a business decision that particular industry or company is going to do, whether or not we think that we're going to be successful. So similar to the last discussion, I'm happy to have this in a line item that we can have further discussion and send out an RFP, but I would, when we analyze those proposals, I would want to have them show how they're going to actually add to the bottom line to the town of Superior. So, Trustee Skumatz?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. General consensus with that. Next.
The next item, policy item for discussion, is consolidation of town administrative functions. And this proposal is to sell the property at 127 East Cold Creek, which is currently where our Parks, Recreation, Open Space staff and our Public Works and Utilities administrative staff are currently located, and then relocate them next to Town Hall in a temporary building with a breezeway connection. The thoughts here was the sale of the property at 127 would cover the costs or expenses that we incurred for the temporary building. It would improve efficiency for staff, get them in, and keep, I mean, we have some residents that still have to walk across the street, which isn't that big of an inconvenience except in weather, but to have everything at one location would be, I think, beneficial for staff as well as for the residents.
Great, thanks. Board discussion? Trustee Pennington?
Matt, have we, I haven't seen an appraisal of that property and land and property for 300. Have we got an official appraisal?
The appraisal just for the property came in.
We won't share that during that open meeting in terms of our negotiating.
Right. Right.
But I can send that to the board.
Okay. Secondly, I want to look at the big picture real estate-wise here. At some point, Town Hall, if Town Center ever builds out, will move, and this land will be available for sale. And so...
Or other usage.
Or other usage. Well, I thought our plan was actually to try to sell it. We wouldn't use it for town purposes.
Well, we never got to that point. We discussed both options.
Okay. Well, let's just conjecture then. Would we be better off having a piece of property that includes that component and this component to give us the flexibility at some point in the future to either A, keep it for an alternative purpose, let's say a community center, parking could be over there where Prost is currently housed, community center could be here. I'm trying to get the big picture here of whether or not there's economic value to be gained from holding on to it until clarity emerges on this whole thing.
If we didn't own the property adjacent to us to the west, I would say there may be some added value with the unknowns, but since we own that property and we could site plan using that property for whatever future use it might be, I would say it's less beneficial.
I think it's more attractive to have this one and this one connected
Right.
if you want to sell it in the future than having something across the street. So,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
yeah, from a real estate perspective, development, think about it.
Trustee Williams?
Aesthetically, how would this new modular setup look like? And How would it attach to the rest of the building?
Well, it'd be a modular building. So,
Okay.
Because it's temporary.
A little bit more info.
We would have a breezeway connection, so we would have to tear out a little section on the west side of Town Hall, build the breezeway, which would connect to this temporary building.
Think Boulder Valley School District.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
I mean, we don't want to, since it's temporary, I wasn't planning on spending a ton of money on it.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
Completely get that.
My comments are, it kind of depends what happens with Town Center and the timeline for that. That if we felt confident that Town Center is going to be 5 years out, then moving this over here, I think makes a lot of sense, both for customer service for residents as well as the improved ability of staff to function out of the buildings. I'm not sure if I have that level of confidence yet what that timeline is, and so while I'm generally in supportive of this, I'm not sure that this is necessarily the right year, although nothing precludes us from, if we approve this issue tonight, we could certainly get more information and be able to discuss it some more, so it would give us some flexibility, but in general, I'm not sure I don't know if I'm in favor of moving forward with this at this particular time. Trustee
I'm a skeptic as well. I think there are a lot of unknowns, and I think just the same sort of rationale we used for several of the previous things, that I don't necessarily see a problem having a space holder here in the budget, but I think we're going to have to see a design. I'd hate for us to build some breezeway contraption, et cetera, only to have to live there for 15 years because Town Center never takes off. So I think it's going to have to pass all the hurdles. We're going to have to see what the design would look like. I certainly want to see the official appraisal and have some confidence that, in fact, it's real. How many acres are over there, by the way? Or parts of an acre?
Less than an acre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe half acre.
Right.
Not even.
I would have guessed
Yeah.
Right.
How does it compare to the property back here, the Bennett property?
I think it's those two lots. I think there's two lots there.
On the Bennetts?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah. No, not on the Bennett's, on the property.
On
across
the
the
right
street.
building.
Yeah.
Trustee Gagos.
I guess I'm less of a skeptic. I kind of like the idea. I see Martin back there smiling. I think he'd like to be closer to you, but closer to Town Hall. So I'm in favor of it. I think it's a short-term solution. I'm hoping the Town Center will become a reality sooner rather than later, and I have confidence in that, actually.
Trustee Skumatz.
So I'm okay with it.
If it turns out that the modular situation isn't very productive, doesn't work very well, how much of that $85K is one-time expense not resellable through the moving, reselling the module, the pad, the pod, or whatever you want to call it?
Right. The modular would be leased.
Okay.
So
That lease expense is in here or is not in here?
it's $18,000 a year.
Okay.
The lease.
Got it.
The $85,000 is in one-time expenses, though.
And we don't recoup that.
Got it.
No.
And I'm not in a big hurry to sell the other property either, but I know that has a significant budget impact, so.
Trustee Williams.
And what is the, at all, likelihood of selling the pad across the street?
I think it's decent simply because it's zoned commercial and it's on McCaslin.
So have you had any interest?
We have a market.
It's not even on the market.
Yeah.
Well, I know that, but
No,
I mean,
no, nobody's.
do you
nobody's-
foresee any interest at this moment?
I do, but nobody's come to us and solicited,
Okay.
asking if we can sell it. Somebody talked about.
So my recommendation is that we would leave this in here, and we, once again, I'm going to ask a lot of hard questions about this, but I'm not sure. In my mind, I've been convinced that this makes sense at this time, but we could certainly leave it in there and have a further discussion about that when the time is right.
Okay.
Okay?
So what did we agree on here?
Well, I thought it was general consensus to leave the budget as it is with this in here.
With this in it, I was actually going to say I wasn't going to support it in here,
Okay?
but I guess I'm the only one.
Well, I think we're going to find out a lot in the next 12 months about what's going to happen across the street, so I think it's a good idea to keep it in there. I'm not really in favor of having portables back there, but I agree
Right.
with the
Right.
idea of having it in place just in case.
But fully understood that it's a space holder only,
Yeah.
and that it is yet to be proven. I don't want to hear the words, it's in the budget.
So I would prefer it not be in the budget. That's just how I feel. When it comes to the budget, it seems to be that it's set in stone. And
That's not true.
if I'm not going to go down that road, not going to be in favor of it, it's just time wasted.
We're giving you mixed signals, though. So.
Well, I think
I'm
that,
the only person here,
I think that's the
obviously.
only comment I've heard, so in general, I think there's general consensus about how to proceed, if that's
Okay.
fair.
All right.
We can vote if you like, but, all right, next.
The next item is new position requests. Town staff is currently at, I believe, 25 full-time employees. And in the original budget, I submitted 5 new positions. Since our finance committee discussions, we have prioritized what we feel are the 3 most important. The 5 that we submitted were, just for everybody's information, was a project manager, an events volunteer coordinator, a parks field maintenance worker, a public works field maintenance worker, and then the last one was a recreation supervisor position. After the discussions at the finance committee level, we prioritized the top 3 of those 5 that staff feels is the most beneficial to the town is the project manager, the events volunteer coordinator, and the parks field maintenance worker. We sent out today by email some additional information, which included a job description for the events volunteer coordinator position and the project manager, as well as a chart showing what staff has done, how many hours we've spent on the Town 9, well, is it Town 9? Yeah, projected for the Town 9 project and the Streets project, and how many hours the project manager position would assume for those types of for those 2 projects. And pull that up, and then I'll put it up for board's questions. And on the project manager, staff identified for the 3, it was 3 parts. It was 3 parts, sorry. Roughly 600 hours. But between the 2, and then streets was 720 hours. Between the 2 positions, it was close to 1,400 hours that we felt between those 2 projects, the project manager position would assume in workload. And then if there's, I don't know if the board has specific questions with regard to those 3 positions or any others, but Martin is here, and Kurt and Paul.
Okay.
Paul here to answer questions.
Trustee Williams?
So I'm going to start this off with that I feel the Parks and Recs Department is the hardest working department here in the town. Not that I'm diminishing any other department, but I just can see it and feel it. And though I feel they're sorely in need of extra help, I unfortunately at this time feel that because the economy is not picking up like we would like it to at this point, I would really like to wait another year before we consider adding new positions at this time. That's my final answer. No.
Other comments? So I have a question, and I think we've talked about this before, and I have some interest in whether or not a field tech person can be cross-trained, and I'm wondering if you have the Public Works field tech, whether or not they could do some Parks and Rec field grading. It just seems like, in my mind, that there might be more opportunity to move from Public Works into the park, as opposed to Parks trying to figure out how to do a Public Works project, so.
And Martin or Kurt, I'll ask either one of you to come up and add your comments, but yeah, I'll let them.
Good evening, Martin Toth, town staff. To reiterate some of the discussions that we've had internally between the Public Works Director and the Town Manager and the rest of the Finance and the Budget Review Committee is the sense fundamentally that we're an all-hands-on-deck team, and when items do come up, both members of each department, regardless of whether it's Parks, Rec, and Open Space, or if it's Public Works, or even one of the administrative departments, when something comes up, people help in some of the day-to-day tasks. There's some overlap on water and reuse water that happen every day. So when the opportunities come up and when there is a need, it happens already, is the short answer. And in terms of amplifying that by having some additional staff, it opens up more opportunities to do that more often. And again, increase effectiveness and have more timely response when issues do come up.
Okay. Other board comments, questions? Trustee Hanson, you're leaning forward.
A couple things. I guess the one I'm still not convinced that advance and volunteer coordinator is a top priority. It seemed like at one point we were really talking about having a parks field maintenance person there as more priority. So I'd be more likely to approve a parks field maintenance person over anything else.
Trustee Skumatz.
And I feel the same way about the volunteer coordinator. And I thought I was expecting to get a more of a real discussion, a real presentation justifying these positions here in front of us today.
Yeah, I mean,
so I'm
happy if the board would like to have Martin and Kurt add additional comments with regard to each of their specific requests.
I thought we were going to make the case, and that, yeah, that's where I was coming from. I thought I clearly asked for that, but maybe I'm wrong.
I thought I heard that too.
Do you want to, Martin, go ahead with the events volunteer coordinator, and then I'll have Kurt come up with the project manager.
Again, Martin Toth, town staff. The three positions that the town manager highlighted as part of the submission for this year's preliminary budget included Parks maintenance technician, to briefly go over some of the narrative that was included in some of the budget submittal materials. There's been an increase in daily projects in our department across the board. It grows exponentially every year. The age and the quality of all the equipment and the maintenance items, the buildings, everything has tended to age. And like a lot of things in our community, they require a little bit more maintenance. And our service requests and some of the citizen-initiated requests have gone up over the years as well. And with increasing the ability to respond to those and trying to do more with less and contract out less, the addition of a parks maintenance technician would help a lot. Right now we operate under a predominantly contract model where we have to schedule someone who works in a specific trade to come help us out with a particular project. It slows down response time and oftentimes costs more. For instance, a co-cal labor, depending on the level of the project and where it is and what it is, costs between $28 and $40 an hour, which is great if we were to operate under a strict contract model. It can be prohibitive when we're trying to be proactive and take care of things that come up on a daily basis that require a lot of specifics and detail and background and knowledge. Tasks come up, and sometimes it's great to use a contractor or a tradesperson in order to complete those tasks. At other times, familiarity with the town, familiarity with the town's level of service, and the ability to operate and handle tasks in the field independently is essential, and that doesn't come up when you have a contractor. One of us needs to be there to help coordinate and purchase product and to make sure that the work is done to the town's standard. Those would be the biggest things. So balancing the workload, appreciating or understanding the increase over the years that's come up in the number of service requests and special projects that have come up. Events require a lot of logistics before the event and cleanup after the event and work during the event. Volunteer projects require going to Lowe's and getting all the supplies and the water and the things that come up over the course of an event. And the ongoing service requests that just happen with any facility. Like graffiti, we've had a lot of those, and trailer repair and some of the other maintenance items that have traditionally been included in the town's maintenance budget. When we're able to coordinate those in-house, we have a much higher effectiveness and ability to respond in a quicker and more timely way, and oftentimes do it for a lot less money. So that would be kind of the shorthand description for the parks maintenance technician. The events volunteer coordinator, I alluded to the volume of workload associated with hosting the town's events and also the special ad hoc events that have come up over the course of the year. An example would be Community Dig Days, and the Kuffner Field naming, and
9/11?
And the 9/11 work, even though town staff wasn't there on site, that the recreation manager on our staff spent about 10 or 15 hours working on the logistics to make sure all the communication was coordinated among all the participants in that, to serve as a single point of contact for questions and to go and buy the supplies and work with the representatives from the board and also with the Superior Historical Commission to make sure that everybody was on the same page and everybody knew what to expect when they showed up, and then also to help coordinate on some of the just outreach, some of the publicizing of the event and getting the word out to make sure folks know they're invited to come participate. So events like that come up, and it just provides a small microcosm of what goes into the larger events. I wouldn't want to bore you with the details of everything that goes in to planning, the logistics, and the purchasing, and the coordinating of vendor permits and booth permits for an event like Chili Fest. It's hundreds of hours. It requires my time, it requires the recreation manager's time, it requires literally everybody's time on our staff to supplement and work with the contractor that has worked with the town for several years to provide be the town in essence, and make sure that the town's interests are represented and make sure that the service standards that the town has established are met or exceeded every year. And then a large task on the backside that a lot of people aren't familiar with is the paperwork. I personally spend 2 to 3 hours a week working on invoices and budgeting and contract pieces associated with any event, something that a contractor can't do, just by virtue of the fact that they're a contractor. So there's a lot of backside administration that's associated with our events that isn't the fun thing to necessarily talk about, but it's a lot of the work that we absorb on the backside to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed, so we can put our best foot forward and host the best event we possibly can. So just the overall size and scope and complexity have changed over the years. The schedule has amplified, and we've increased the number of folks and what their expectations are when they come to our events, and we'd like to try and continue to elevate those. So having a staff member dedicated to that purpose would help in a lot of ways. The town's contract model, having a contractor serve as the specific events coordinator, has resulted in us having an off-site person helping us with sponsorship outreach and trying to develop some of the relationships that are necessary to host volunteers and gain sponsorship and gain just participation in our events. So having somebody who is on staff coordinate that and coordinate with the staff from the Superior Chamber of Commerce would be another big bonus to having a staff member on staff. And then also the natural overlap. Everybody in this room pretty much has been to our events and probably volunteered at our events. The logistics of receiving requests to be a volunteer and then finding a place for that person to volunteer and making sure that they know when to be there, where to go, and what they'll be doing, what their expectations are for how long they'll be there is a huge responsibility. And it's one of the things that I'd like to see our department do a better job at over the next year or two. It's one of the things we spend a lot of time on as we can, and we rely on all the resources and all the outreach that we can in order to host volunteers to help them deliver the quality events that we do, and having a staff member on board to make sure that the message is consistent, that folks who are interested in volunteering at events or for projects and programs, get a consistent response and have the opportunities presented to them that they need in order to participate would be a big difference for our department. So that naturally segues just to the volunteer component of this in general. You know, the number of projects that the town has hosted, from Arbor Day volunteers to the 9/11 Day to the Dig Days at 3 parks and the Eagle Scout projects, and the school district wanting to come out and do cleanup days, or private entities that want to come and participate in a project, or just citizens who have teenagers at home that, for whatever reason, might need to do a job, whether it's court-ordered or maybe their parents just want them to. Those folks are always, they're always looking for good opportunities to serve the town, and we don't always have the best opportunity, and we're not able to process all the requests to just carry those projects out, because it requires some logistics and preparation, some finding a site, finding some appropriate work, and making sure the work is a good fit for the person, and then it gets done to the town standard. So the number of projects and programs and the expectation that the town continues to deliver those and expand those has been huge, and it will continue to grow.
And do you want to, before I ask Kurt to come up, do you want to offer any comments on project manager?
Sure. On the project manager, the table that you received this afternoon from the finance director listed a lot of specific items, and on my sheet it's awful small, but if you have any questions on any of those, I'd be glad to help answer them if I can. The gray shaded box shows the 2 deducts from both my position and also from the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Superintendent. The biggest chunks there, as you can tell, are some of the preliminary stuff. The first line there, I apologize, these aren't numbered, but the scoping and estimating has a big chunk for me, and also the bid packaging, and also the daily construction coordination, and the non-contract items. Those would be big chunks for me. And then if you scoot over to the Parks and Recreation Open Space Superintendent's box, the significant chunks there are after the approvals, after sort of the paperwork has been pushed in a lot of ways. Serving as contract manager in my role is one of the things that oftentimes gets added on to some of my day-to-day duties. It's not that it's a problem, but it's something else in addition to all the other work that needs to get done over the course of the day in our department. So once the actual construction happens and a design is approved and a contract is executed, then you can see Parks and Open Space Superintendent spent a lot of time working on some of the daily construction and also coordinating the non-contract items. And all the items associated with that project that weren't the dog park contract were coordinated in-house. That was a lot of the superintendent's time. It was a lot of my time. It was a lot of volunteer time. We had court-ordered workers. We had Eagle Scouts involved. We had a couple of private entities that were all working on different projects for the parts of that project. And we were there the whole time to make sure that it was carried out to the town's specifications and also met the service levels, stayed on time and under budget. So that would be a big chunk of the role and responsibility of the project manager in our department for that one project. As I think the town manager and finance director and public works director have alluded to in previous meetings, and I think this table attempts to illustrate some of the preparation, the scoping, the estimating, and then as well as the delivery of a product requires a lot of on-site and daily maintenance and response time. Having contractors carry out the town's significant contracts and construction projects has worked well for the town, but it would be we would be remiss if we weren't to convey to you that it required a lot of time and energy on the part of staff.
Okay, thanks.
Kurt, do you have any ads on project manager you want to share?
That would be helpful.
What?
That would be good.
Oh, it's over here. Sorry.
So I don't know if there's public comment on the project manager.
Well, I'll just, while he's pulling that up, I'll just add for the board, in our analysis of these 3 positions, the field worker positions were, the field worker position and the events volunteer coordinator position were revenue neutral because of some deducts in contracting services. And then the public project manager was a savings of $100,000 was our conservative estimate for that position to the town. So, do you have the chart? Can you throw up that chart real quick?
Which chart?
The table that Martin wrote.
Yeah, where's the table? Excel, yeah. Shared. I'm a Mac guy. I move slow. Budget. Budget. 2012 budget. 2012 budget. Project manager savings. There it is. Okay. Let's see. Let's try 75. Okay.
So that's the table that Martin was previously mentioned, as far as the number of hours identified for each of those specific tasks on the left. And it's difficult to read.
So the bottom line on that is 1,423 hours, and so I'm confused about, you're saying that's what could have happened over the last year, and that's 70% of an FTE, and can you talk about, so that means that 3 positions sort of contributed 70% of FTE and sort of extra hours and
Correct.
past, or,
Yep,
or
that's
can
correct.
You, can you talk about that a little bit, and why we need a FTE, or that sort of thing? Can you try to make the case a little bit more clearly?
Sure. I should talk about your streets program specifically, Kurt.
Yeah. Myself, for the 2011 streets project, I probably had about 700 some hours for the last year and a half. There's a lot of things I would have liked to have done better if I had more time, just on the streets projects. Certainly been some conversation in this room about why we didn't do something, why we didn't see things earlier, why we didn't do proof rolls sooner. And I think having a project manager will allow us to do things better, to simplify. We can get weeded a bunch of numbers and overly complex, but when I came here, I was told our model is we do third-party consulting, and I came from that model. Sorry, I came from that model, and so I get it. I get the culture, and when I came here, when I was in that model, my goal was to deliver value, and I think I did that to an extent that I got here. And since I've been here, my goal has been to deliver value to the town. I think we did that. The roundabout was a mess when I showed up. And, there was no way I was going to get it open in October. And we got it open in October. And then Tier 3 snow pine, there was no way we were going to add those extra routes and keep our costs the same, but we did. We got rid of our longtime consultant last year in the middle of trying to figure out Tier 3, and no one really threw out a better solution. So I came up with an alternative GMP delivery system to give you guys the factor of safety as you wanted, the risk control, and more importantly, get a big project done before school opened up. We got that done. So my goal has been to deliver value, and it's taken a lot of work. This is just hours from one project, and as I've been here for the last 2 years, I see a need bigger than the staff we have. It is bigger than the amount of consultants I can hire up, ramp up, and manage 20 direct reports. I can hire as many consultants as we want, but I can't manage 20 consultants well. I can't manage them in a way that I think the expectations are here. So all this time I've been working hard to try to make this delivery. And in a meeting, Trustee Hansen threw out, this makes no sense why we're paying somebody X amount of dollars when we can pay someone else $100,000 or whatever we want to pay them to be here. So we worked with that because I believe that business case exists. So that's what we've tried to do. And so what I'm trying to say now is I think we can do all the things we've been doing better. I think there's a lot of things we're not doing, like asset management and maintenance of your infrastructure. And I think by adding this position, we can get better in all those areas, and we can start to catch up on areas where we're not even touching it. In regards to organizational structure, that position would report to me as the public works director. We coordinate with Martin, the Parks, Recreation, Open Space. We both report to the town manager, who reports to the board and every other committee. We'd certainly, that person would work on every project in a prioritized fashion as the town saw fit. And related to risk, Taylor Coors, or the GMP itself, does offer an added layer of risk management for us. I think there's that layer. There's different percentages of the project cost that we pay because their subs may have a payment and performance bond similar to the payment and performance bond they have with us. So those things do get buried in your costs. But the layer's there. And last year, Taylor Coors hired Quality Paving and Diamond Excavating, and then somebody else, and all three went out of business. You could say, well, that really worked well for us. I think it did. But at the same time, if we were bringing a project manager and bring that Taylor Coors model in-house, we'd probably think a little harder about who that sub is that's now working for us and do a little additional pre-qualification. So you could save a few percent by not having the Taylor Coors, or you could keep that percent and we could continue to do that type of system. But ultimately, I can't deliver to Ridge residents a big process, long-term, short-term plan in 30 days, and keep the accountability to the CIP for this year, and make sure the 2012 street project is perfect next year. I'm wearing down. I know other people are wearing down. I think this project, or this person, provides a lot of value to the town.
Thanks. Trustee Skumatz.
So maybe you can help me with the math here, because let's
Sure.
just talk about bottom line, okay?
That works.
I don't care about all these individual
Yep.
things.
It's not
So
worried
what you're
about
saying is that 3 people on average over the last year spent 25% apiece over full-time. That's what this is
Easily
telling
on
me?
those
Okay,
projects.
I'm just saying,
Yep.
based on just
Yes.
this piece. So, and you're saying that the Taylor Coors money provides some offset sort of for hiring an additional person. If this kind of stuff will be continuing next year, do you think that last quarter of a person is going to be the extra work for the Taylor Coors type work, or where do you see the extra quarter of a person coming from? What will they be doing above and beyond what you're sort of laying out here, which is all the kinds of help you were giving? I don't know. Just can you make the case
you start to
for that
gain
extra quarter
efficiencies.
person and then tell me what your anticipated cost and anticipated savings are?
Yes.
Bottom line.
Yes, bottom line.
Bottom line, not detail.
That person does this, and they do what Taylor Coors is doing. You gain a lot of efficiencies by having that in-house. There's a lot of overlap in
And the
this.
Taylor Coors stuff can be done with a quarter FTE? That's
You
why I'm
gain
asking, because that's
efficiencies
what
between
this is implying.
You gain
So-
efficiencies between this FTE and the quarter FTE. There's
Okay.
a lot of overlap that happens in the contract management system. There's a lot of work I do just to manage their contract paperwork. You eliminate that from a lot of different contracts, and that creates a lot of gain time. So the contract manager alone is a lot of work. So you gain efficiencies by consolidating.
So a quarter time is plus a bit of, whatever you're saying, efficiencies, you think make up a complete FTE?
I think if I'm hearing you right.
And getting regular staff back to more regular hours, because we can't
Yes.
expect people to give a quarter extra time
Yeah, but we're
over
not
any
going to
kind
be
of
leisure.
extended period.
I don't want this to think that we bring this person on and Martin and I or kicking back over.
No, but getting you to closer to 40 hours. I'm not
Yeah,
trying
I
to
think
say,
it's as close.
I tend to expect a little.
But during event
Yes.
time, Martin's still working a lot of hours.
I know.
Peak season construction, I'm still working a lot of hours. We still have second half of CIP, of this year's CIP that still needs to deliver. We got 2 months left in the year. For me to meet some of your goals, I got to do a lot of work in 2 months for some of these studies that are left to do. And new workload that's picked up for residents. Yeah. Doesn't stop the bleeding, but it sure does make it lighter.
So again, the dollars bottom line is?
Dollars bottom line. I think we save $225,000 a year by not doing this person. I think this person costs us $120,000 a year by the time you do salaries and benefits and annualize a $30,000 pickup over 10 years, computer, office stuff. So $105,000 a year.
Trustee Cookros?
Well, both your presentation and Martin's presentation, I'm very comfortable to feel supportive of what you're asking us.
Thank you.
You can do your job well. Better than your juniors.
Okay.
It makes sense.
Thanks. I mean, I completely, well, I know that the board is fully aware that my position is that the project manager is going to provide better quality service to the residents of the town of Superior, and we're going to save $100,000 a year. It seems like a win-win, which doesn't happen very often. So, thanks.
And-
Trustees Gomez.
And I'm more convinced on the project manager than I was during our discussions in the budget meetings. I still haven't heard a case that, for the dollars and cents case for the events volunteer coordinator, and could I hear the bottom line again, or
That would not be
could
the
someone
bottom
please
line.
No, Mark.
present that in a
No,
clear
Mark.
way? This is not just, this is for everybody.
Martin Toth, town staff. So the finance director handed me the summary of this project, or the summary of the new position request from a previous meeting. So the events volunteer coordinator will be glad to walk through the reductions. Right now we have a consultant, a contract consultant who provides general coordination for all the town's events. That's $15,000. And that combined with the $50,000 consulting contract to coordinate the Superior Memorial Classic totals $45,000. So it would be a savings of $45,000 between the two event coordination items. And then the enhanced revenue associated with bringing in the sponsorship role, actually increasing how much we spend doing outreach and sponsorship work and working in coordination with the Chamber of Commerce is conservatively estimated at $11,500. And then the ability to host a new town event. If it was Superior Days or potentially a volunteer appreciation dinner would be an increased expense at $8,500. So the net savings that the finance director lets me know about is that it's $7,765.
77,000.
7,700.
Yeah.
That's not what it was before, but that's what he's saying now.
Oh, the net.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry, I was following your the total cost. Okay, the net
So I'm
savings is
sorry, I
7,000.
mixed
Okay.
and matched the expenses and the revenues, but the
Okay,
new expense
thanks.
at $8,500. In a very clinical sense, the almost $8,000 savings is a conservative idea of what I think this person saves in a real bottom line sense. The value of the volunteer projects. If we had to, this wasn't included in the spreadsheet, but when Alan and I, the park superintendent, went through the work that was done this year, we estimated conservatively that the volunteers who worked here supplied and replaced $25,000 in just net labor. Whether that was trash or working at 3 parks or tamping dirt or installing irrigation, or the trail work that the kids from Kentucky did. So that would be.
Thanks, that was a number we asked for, and I hadn't heard that one before, so thank you.
Sure.
So I have a question for the town manager. If we hire all these 3 people, not giving you 5, so we're saving $100+ a year on the project manager, and the other ones are neutral. December 2012, you'll be able to deliver a report that confirms that? You feel confident?
I do.
Okay. One sec.
I'm-
One sec. We'll take public comment, but,
And if not, we're willing to let them go?
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Trustee Pennington?
Yeah, if I can weigh in, I think this is a very difficult subject. Needless to say, we've got a lot of straight faces up here. I would agree with Deborah that I believe Parks and Rec have fully demonstrated to me that they basically squeeze every ounce of blood out of that turnip. I'm not prepared in this economy to fund 2 positions in Park and Rec. However, I am willing to fund 1 additional position in Parks and Rec, and I cannot say what that is. I'm going to have to defer to the manager and Martin where the biggest bang comes for the buck, even if it means incrementally increasing the salary of that person to draw in more talent that can maybe do more things, maybe take off, for example, some of the invoicing that you have to do and that type of project management in addition to doing volunteer coordination. So I'm fully convinced that you need additional help, and I'm willing to allocate 1 position for it. Going to the project manager position, I've heard various cases for it. My gut is that now is not the year to do this. I think there are too many things in flux regarding that particular position. I believe this is going to have to be evolutionary in my mind. This job of convincing me is going to take more than the budget meetings and this particular meeting. We're going to have to address some tough topics in that. For example, it doesn't make me feel good that under Taylor Coors' contract, 3 subs went out of business, because right now Taylor Coors bears that weight and that responsibility, and they've still got to meet their contracts. They've got to perform that work despite the 3 subs being out of business. Yes, we would have to more carefully select those subs, but by definition, subs are sort of a threatened species in this economy, and I have no confidence that we would be better at selecting subs than Taylor Coors, who is an expert in this field and is very, they're expert. This is their professional line of business. So at this particular time, I'm not persuaded about the project manager. I think I'd like to see another year with that thought brewing in the back of my mind and seeing that case being developed over the year 2012.
Trustee Skumatz?
And I'm not terribly gung-ho, but I do want to know what we do with the 75% of an extra person that we're asking our town staff
Well,
to-
this, just to clarify, that was based on 2 projects. That is not on net for the department over the year. So I take it at its face value that was simply on the 2 projects being outlined right here. So that's where I stand on that.
Okay. Any other comments?
A couple quick comments. Parks and Rec Department, I also don't see how we could bring in more than 1 person into the department, and I kind of break it down to what is absolutely necessary. Events could come and go. We may decide in the future that we don't want to do as many events, but the maintenance of the fields is mandatory. We have to do maintenance on those, and I think if we've got 1 person in place now that's doing those, that's where we need the help. The project manager position, what happens after tonight, Matt? If whatever direction you have, you're going to put it into the budget, we're going to review it again?
Right, well, we have, first and second reading of the budget still to come.
Okay. So I think there's still lots of questions about that position that will come out over the next couple of meetings. So I'm not prepared to make that decision tonight on the project manager, and if I had to make the decision, I'd say no, that I'm not in favor of it.
Okay. Trustee Gregorus?
I think Trustee Hansen and I have agreed pretty much since we've been on board on most issues, but I do believe that events is a big part of what makes this town special. So I don't think we need to be flippant about the events come and go. I mean, the events that this town puts together are great events. They're very well attended. They take tremendous energy and tremendous effort on the part of the staff. And even with all the volunteers that we get, frankly, I'm convinced that you do need an events coordinator. So I might be in the minority here, but I support you.
Okay. So with that, I'll entertain any public comment regarding this issue.
George Kuffner, 7520 West Concord. I've been around a long time, and I've been around a lot of the events and a lot of the work that's been performed in town. And if we go back to before the town took over the districts, we had one guy that took care of all of this. It was Brian Appleby. He made sure the parks run right. He made sure Cocal towed the line. He did all the street work. Yeah, they might have had an engineering firm help. But in these kind of economic times, just to throw another 100,000 here and another 100,000 there, our ship's a little bit top-heavy, I feel. I mean, if we need more employees, we need the kind that work on a jet truck, on the end of the paint nozzle, so that we can keep up with our infrastructure. We don't need another guy to stand there and watch. Well, you better get another guy in here. Well, we don't have another guy. That's you. That's another management position. We have a lot of those. And I think that in these times that maybe some of our heads of our departments need to bite their lip, and they may have to put a few extra hours in because they make a lot of money. When times get better, maybe we can look. But right now, I think that economically, we all just need to batten down and get the job done. Because if we keep raising more people, the taxes got to go up, then they're going to come down. And I've never seen very many positions that were made in a government status that ever get removed. Well, once you get it, it's pretty much there for set in concrete. And I think that we need to just get more out of the people we have. We don't need to hire more people.
Okay, thanks. Additional public comment?
Can I just make one response to that?
Sure.
These guys put in 60 to 80 hours a week. In my mind, that's unacceptable.
Okay, additional public comment?
Jim Payne, Superior resident, member of ProStack. I was just curious, as some of you know, I do concur that Parks and Rec, and I get to see them very closely. I certainly commend them on the work they do, and I know they work long hours. I know in the 3 parks, for example, they put in a lot of extra work, using volunteers to reduce costs, some of which went back into the project to make it a better result, and some of which saved money for the town. So I think that's a consideration, but I'm just struck with the observation that when Martin is director, when his predecessor was here, that predecessor had Martin. So you had 2 people and you had a real workhorse in Martin at the time. So that's not the case now. There is no Martin under Martin. I mean, he's got good people, but those are people that had people in those positions before. So there's obviously been some redeployment, but I think they're sort of lower level positions. So I was just curious, has the FTE within Parks and Rec been constant over this time, or has it been a redeployment? And has that worked? I'm not saying it hasn't, but I'm just wondering what happened to the arrangement we had where we had a director and a planning analyst who provided a lot more of that effort. So, just
okay. Thanks. I don't know what the FTE is in Parks and Rec right now, I guess.
It's been constant. New director comes in and they make changes within the department. Martin decided to reallocate some of his staff resources to cover different areas, and he more than likely assumed some additional responsibilities, or kept and assumed, I guess. But so it was no new FTEs, just a reorganization, basically.
Okay, additional public comment regarding this issue? So I came into the meeting not being convinced that the recreation supervisor was going to be something I was going to support. But, you know, if you can convince me that this is revenue neutral and you're going to provide better service, okay, I've been sold on that one.
You said recreation supervisor?
I'm sorry, the events coordinator. Yeah. Misspeaking. That was the old name. And then with the project manager, with, you know, saving money and doing better job, why would I turn down $100,000 a year? And I think that we'd get a lot of bang for our buck from field staff. So I guess I'm surprising myself, but I think that you've sold me tonight on all three of those positions. So I don't think that we're going to have unanimity. So what I'd recommend is anybody wants to entertain a motion so it's clear for staff.
I didn't want to make a motion, but I did want to say I think maybe one way to I could go along with trying to make the events volunteer coordinator position be more flexible and do some of the other parks job as well, and not go with 3 positions.
What's your thought on the project manager position? Or?
If it can be demonstrated that there were savings at the end of the year, I'm willing to. I think I'm willing to go with it for now because I just don't want to see staff, us expecting staff to spend a lot of hours on an ongoing basis, because I believe they do a lot of that voluntarily, but to feel like it's being imposed on you is a whole different animal.
Okay.
I like the idea of what Lisa just said about the events coordinator and the field maintenance person, if that can be kind of combined and maybe make a joint effort or reallocate. I think that's a good idea, and I'd be in favor of that, but I'm still, as of tonight, I'm not convinced, right now convinced on the project manager position.
So could a motion actually separate?
Whatever you like.
Well, just make a motion on letting Martin make the choice on between those 2 positions, one of the positions, and how to use that, and then put the project manager position on hold.
What was on there? Just one.
Okay.
Okay. That sounds fair. So why don't we have a little hand raising for the field tech? I think they're totally different. I don't know how you combine
what I heard,
those, but
Allow Martin to make that decision on how he's going to do it.
Okay.
So repeat your motion, Chris.
So make a motion to allow the Parks and Rec Department to choose how they utilize one position.
Second.
So just in terms of, we're talking budget here, so how much money are you allocating to that?
Well, this is what goes back to my question to Matt, that if there's going to come back to a reading, we're not actually approving this right now, it's going to come back and...
So let's say this motion passes, what we would do is go back, have an internal discussion with Martin and Paul and his staff, and Martin would give us his feedback, and then based on that, we would bring forward the first reading of the budget with that position and the costs and expenses associated with that position.
You're going to make a budget based on all the kinds of pros and cons
Right.
and ups and downs that we did on these policy things, and this would be one of those things. You
Yeah,
come up with
I mean, the
dollar
budget
amount
currently
for that
includes
position.
the deducts, the expenses that have been dropped and or that would be incurred by position, and the savings that would be incurred as well.
But we're not approving to spend money on this position.
No, we have to
You
put,
just direct.
we have to
Yeah.
type numbers into the spreadsheet.
And they're in the budget currently. These numbers for each position are in there. So whatever position, Martin, if this were to pass, then the other position would be taken out of the budget for the first reading, and the position that was chosen would be kept in.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor? Hanson, Skumatz, Gregorez, Pennington. Opposed is Williams and Muckle, so that passes.
I suspect we're opposing for opposite reasons, though. Okay?
We are.
So, any other motions? Trustee Gregorez?
To include the project manager position.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor? Skumatz, Muckle, Gregorez. Opposed is Hanson, Williams, and Pennington, so that fails. Yeah, it's a tie. Tie goes to the...
Tie goes, fails as a motion.
Okay, well, I guess we're done then.
With that one, now we have 4.
Yes, sorry, the next one.
Wait for Joe to come back.
Well, Joe will be back. We can
Well,
talk
and
about
at
it
the
at the next
first
meeting.
reading, I mean, Joe is
Can you bring
absent.
Can you bring it up in the first meeting?
Yeah, we can, if there's changes from the first to second, staff can make those.
To bring it back in the first meeting.
Yeah,
Can we just waste our time?
Just
Waste all this time.
No, it's not a waste of time, it's a discussion. It's-
depends on how you look at it. Right.
We're dead even. We have the seventh trustee that's not present, I think he has the right to vote on this.
You felt very bad it couldn't be.
The last item is fund.
He wasn't planning on us voting on this, right? I don't think, because he didn't write anything in his notes. So.
We have to go with what Kendra says as is allowed between what we're doing now and the future. So if first reading does allow it to come back, then we have to.
Anything, none of this is binding.
Well, I'll just let the board know how this works. So the first reading will not include the project manager position based on tonight's vote. And then if a board member wanted to reintroduce that at the first reading or anything else, bus shelters, for instance, they can do that, and we would make that change if it got the majority in the second reading.
Okay. Well, I hope we talk about it again.
The last item was funding of new park amenities. Recently in the past, we have the town's process for new park amenities is to be was fully funded out of the Conservation Trust Fund. This year's, the 2012 budget, there's a slight change in that to where new park amenities competed in the general fund CIP. And this discussion is determining that the board wants to move forward with that process or revert back to the way we've done it in the past where it's funded totally out of the Conservation Trust Fund.
So, I take education from our legislators in Washington. Easy to spend a whole bunch of money on fun stuff. And so I guess that's why I'm saying is I think it would be best for us to shackle our spending impulses on parks and recreation to hold it to the line of the CIP. And I feel very concerned that this is going to be something that's going to erode public works projects for just maintenance down the road. So I know I'm the lone voice here on this one, but I just have to make sure that I said it again.
You've never been the lone voice on that. I've always agreed.
Trustee Pennington.
I believe the shackling of a project to the $100,000 that's in the Conservation Trust is what's responsible for the current state of town money. We spent piecemeal here, piecemeal there, piecemeal the other place because we were limited by a max of $100,000. And as a consequence, we're now having to throw, whatever we approve, we're from $700,000 to $1 million to repair this piecemeal. So I see absolutely no reason to be bound by an arbitrary $100,000. We are a town of our amenities, just the same way as I agree with you, we're a town of our unique events. I see no reason to be shackled to a $100,000 conservation trust fund figure. I think every project this town approves should stand on its own merits and be approved on its own merits and vie against every other project. for approval or denial. So I think it should be, I'm happy with the first 100,000 Oaks coming out of the Conservation Trust Fund. I don't know if budgetarily that's specific enough, but that's our starting point, and beyond that, everything has to vie against everything else for approval based on merits.
Trustee Skumats?
I have two comments on that, and one is, I'll start with last first, and that is that if we're going to have the parks and other things compete, then it should compete for that 100K too, in my opinion, but I don't think it would be a given that it would get that. Maybe there's some legal issue about that money being spent a certain way, but I think that was only a policy and not a legal requirement. The second thing I would say is that I would disagree with your premise about why Town 9 ended up where it did, and I think it had a lot more to do with the fact that there was a lot of dissent over how the park was going to be built up, and a lot of people didn't want much happening there. They wanted to stay a neighborhood park, and that just prevailed for a long time, and there wasn't clear direction for a long time. And I think that's more the reason why it ended up where it was, not the dollar amount, but we can agree to disagree.
So if it were to remain that parks projects are going to compete against road projects and other CIP, then I don't see any reason why the CTEF fund should fund something arbitrarily and not just go into parks operations. So it seems like it doesn't make any budgetary sense to me whatsoever to pick one where one project might come from and not something else. If this is the direction that we're heading, yes, I'd recommend putting the concentration.
If I can
Right.
clarify my premise, I'm assuming we're into every budget year for at least $100,000 in terms of park operations. So that's what I
Yeah.
refer to as that first $100,000 funds parks. It funds park operations or whatever standing commitment we always have. So I think you and I are talking about the same thing here.
Trustee Hanson?
Yep, I agree with Trustee Pennington that just because we allow parks to compete for money in the general fund, that it doesn't mean we have to do the project, but at least we have the ability to do it if we want to. But if we limit it to just $100,000 a year, I agree that we won't get parks developed. If residents really want to have a park or some other really nice amenity, we should be able to do that. And as representatives of them, we should be allowed to have those compete.
And I guess, so I think that it's staying how it is right now, if I understand this. So I guess just my only editorial comment is that over the course of 14 years, we've been able to build a whole bunch of parks within that budget dollar. So I feel pretty confident that we could do that again. Trustee Williams?
But the bulk of all the parks that we have currently came through the PUD, not through the Conservation Trust Fund. That would be my only comment on that.
Well,
Although,
depends on what you mean, but
well, I mean, Purple Park, the majority of Purple Park came through the PUD.
community park
Community
amenities
park?
were not.
I thought it was built.
Some
Richmond?
of
I thought it was
the,
built by Richmond.
No. They didn't spend money on it. So
certain amenities were
some
set.
things in there they did. A big bulk came from district dissolution.
Certainly not the turf field. I mean, that was like $1 million. That didn't come from the Conservation Trust Fund.
No, that came from the district.
Okay. And as far as the Conservation Trust Fund, there are specific things that can be spent for only, correct? Can you legally let us all know that?
Maintenance and new park.
Say that again?
Maintenance and new park amenities.
And currently, as far as maintenance goes, for all of our parks, is it over 100,000 or under?
Over.
Significantly, right?
Yes.
Like,
Our COCO contract is
300,000 or so.
700,000. Well, I think it went down. It's in the 600,000.
Yeah, that's right. It went down to the $600,000.
Okay.
Okay. So I think that there's general consensus about that.
And last thing on this is just, we're planning our first reading on October.
I've got a comment on the parks.
I think that we.
I thought that you had, well, sir, have more public comment.
George
Round
Custer
two.
again. I mean, $100,000 don't go very far towards a new park anywhere. And if anybody thinks that we don't need them, you need to come up to Sagamore and watch the 2 busloads of kids get on every morning. Not 1 busload, but 2 of them. I mean, and if we don't put some money into our parks to interest these kids to come to the parks and play, we will, in some time, have vandalism that we can't handle. That's the way it was when it first started out here. There wasn't much for the kids to do. And when you don't give them something to do, they find things to do. And usually it costs us money to fix. So I think at least $100,000 with the ability to make it interesting for the kids. Whether it's a rock climbing wall or another bike park, skate park, whatever. If we know they're in that park, we know where our kids are. So I think at least $100,000 towards new parks or new amenities in our existing parks. Because our field, our high-dollar carpet down there is getting pretty worn. And it won't be long and we'll have tears in it.
Okay, so you were saying next reading?
Yeah, the preliminary reading of the budget is scheduled right now for October 24th, and then hopefully the second and final reading would be on November 14th.
Okay. All right, that wraps up item number 9. That brings us to item number 10, executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and/or instruct negotiators pursuant to CRS 24-6-402(4)(e) regarding the Jefferson Parkway, to consider personnel matters pursuant to CRS 24-6-402(4)(f), and hold a conference with the town's attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24-6-402(4)(b). Is there a motion to go into executive session by Trustee Pennington, second by Trustee Gutierrez? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much for an executive session.
May I